The sky cracked open, revealing deep chasms and exposing the turbulent void, where the gales of energy roared. Meanwhile, Qin Tua was like a kite with a broken string, hurtling backward for thousands of yards, shattering several divine peaks and immortal mountains before coming to a halt. The sword intent filled the sky, all pointing directly at Qin Tua. In the void, the I Will was like a totem watching over everything. "You're courting death," Qin Tua roared as he walked out of the shattered immortal mountain. He waved his arms, releasing waves of formidable yen power that wrapped around Jian Wushuang. How noisy! Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. He reached out and crushed all the yen power that was coming at him. Then he leaped towards Qin Tua. A heavy punch thundered forth, and the fist's energy ruptured the air, instantly dispelling all the blood mist. It was a punch infused with the essence of Slaughter Dao, enough to make even a Grand Yen immortal struggle to withstand it. However, Qin Tua stubbornly resisted, his chest collapsing and breaking apart, and his yen power cascading like tassels into the void. He couldn't believe it. A mere yen immortal could actually inflict such serious injuries on him. One had to know that between a Grand Yen immortal and a yen immortal, there was a chasm that could not be crossed, let alone cause harm to a Grand Yen immortal. Yet it was happening before his eyes. Divine blood spurted, the immortal body shattered, but after just a few dozen breaths, everything healed. In Qin Tuo's eyes, only madness remained. He had been suppressed by Jian Wushuang all along, even when he reached the realm of Grand Yen Immortal. This had driven him almost insane. Boundless crimson blood mist condensed into chains that fell from the void, piercing through every inch of the earth and the divine mountains. The elders and disciples of the Xianxia sect, who had already lost their way, didn't even attempt to evade. They stared blankly at the void, then were pierced by the descending chains, turning into dust. Jian Wushuang frowned, the invisible sword forming once more. He slashed at the void, severing each chain. Motherfucker, is this bastard crazy? Why won't he even let his own sect's disciples off? Within the barrier, Chun Qing was struggling to resist. It must be that I'm causing trouble. We need to find a way to remove it, said Chun Qiu in a deep voice, his gaze fixed on the eye while hovering in the void. I'll think of a way. Chun Qing gritted his teeth. With a thought, the true sword hanging from his waist unsheathed and carried 1,000,000 sword intents towards the eye wheel in the void. The dark red eye wheel was enormous, almost splitting the sky in half. Its pupils were chaotic and mesmerizing, emitting an enchanting aura from the center of the vertical pupil. 1,000,000 sword intents condensed into a massive real sword, piercing towards the eerie eye wheel. In the next moment, a bizarre scene unfolded. The 1,000,000 sword intents penetrated the eye wheel without any resistance. But that was it. Like a drop in the ocean, it did not trigger any detonation, and the eye wheel remained unharmed. Not good. It seems there's big trouble. Chun Qing's lips quivered, as if he foresaw something terrible. Next, seemingly to confirm his thoughts, the eye wheel in the void suddenly trembled. Then a massive true sword tainted with dark red blood mist shot out, retracing its path and heading straight for Chun Qing, cutting through Chunk Chu's barrier. Run! Chun Qing exclaimed in panic, fleeing with Chun Qiu. Boom! The huge sword slashed down, shattering the earth. Thousands of immortal mountains collapsed in that moment. All the elders and disciples of the Xianxia sect who had arrived were ultimately buried, leaving no trace behind. Witnessing this scene, Jian Wushuang turned to Qin Tua. You want to fight to the death? So what? The ultimate outcome will be your demise. Qin Tua replied coldly. In that case, as you wish. With those words, an invisible sword in his hand slashed towards Qin Tua. The void collapsed, and endless sword intents surged. Qin Tua roared as the meridians on his immortal body coiled, causing his figure to grow several times larger. Following that, a colossal dark red image form appeared behind him. The image form was so massive, earth-shattering, and shrouded in mist that it was nearly impossible to make out its true form, only its hazy outline. Moreover, chains extended from the void, entangling the dark red Dharma image, restricting its movements. With the appearance of the image form, his aura skyrocketed to an unprecedented level, even making Jian Wushuang feel threatened. I am already a Grand Yen Immortal. What are you? Qin Tuo roared, his 5 fingers spreading as billions of blood radiance suddenly shot out. Facing the overwhelming blood radiance, Jian Wushuang calmly advanced with hands behind his back, his gaze indifferent. A faint golden aura had quietly enveloped him, easily deflecting the needle-like swords of blood radiance. Qin Tuo was shocked. Although he had already reached the Grand Yam Immortal realm, Jian Wushuang's calmness and determination still made his heart palpitate. Therefore, he made a decisive move, and the dark red image form behind him that was bound by the chains was revived. The image form raised its arm, and its colossal hand, capable of obscuring the sky, descended upon Jian Wushuang. The void trembled, seemingly unable to withstand such power, on the brink of collapse at any moment. Boom! Rumble! A deafening roar echoed through the vast expanse, where crimson and dark red collided, and the shockwave that erupted swept away the void, causing the entire heavenly region to falter and fracture. The hand of the dark red image form shattered upon impact, and a dazzling figure, like a blazing star, appeared before Qin Tuo in an instant. Everything happened too quickly. When he finally reacted, Jian Wushuang stood before him. So, what if you're a Grand Yen Immortal? Following this indifferent voice, a chilling sword pierced through his immortal body. Qin Tuo felt an indescribable pain coursing through every fiber of his being. He instinctively glanced at his chest. In the center of his heart, an invisible sword was embedded, and divine blood gushed forth. With the power of the Yen Immortal, cutting through the body of a Grand Yen Immortal was an unimaginable scene. Qin Tuo wanted to retaliate but found that he couldn't even move a finger. His yen power seemed to have found an outlet and was pouring out uncontrollably from his shattered heart. Meanwhile, Jian Wushuang remained cold and composed, as if slaying a Grand Yen Immortal was the simplest task for him. I'll spare your life if you tell me the whereabouts of those 3 Yen Immortals, he said indifferently, his voice leaving no room for doubt. The overwhelming sense of annihilation filled Qin Tuo with terror. He opened his mouth. They are all. Before he could finish the sentence, his expression suddenly changed, contorting into a sinister grin. You want to know where they are? Then go join them. Jian Wushuang realized the danger, but it was already too late. A Grand Yen Immortal's power at the moment of life and death far exceeded imagination. Qin Tuo directly embraced him and shot into the void. There, a gigantic I will hung in the air. A massive dark red I will radiating an enchanting and mesmerizing aura, reaching the pinnacle of eerie. It was as if he had crashed into water, creating layers of ripples. Qin Tuo pushed Jian Wushuang and disappeared into the huge eye wheel. Buzz! The eye wheel was perfectly round, releasing billions of dark red lights. Chun Qing, Chun Xiu, and Gu Ting were unable to move an inch under the bloodlight. They could only bitterly resist. Motherfucker. Even if I die today, I'm going in. Chun Qing roared hoarsely as he endured the bloody glow. With their immortal styles, they managed to withstand the immense pressure for a moment. Then, Chun Qing and Chun Xiu did not hesitate and jumped into the eye wheel. Gu Ting shivered, and a complicated expression appeared on his face. A moment later, he gritted his teeth and said, "Wait for me. I'm coming too." Could this be the inner world of that eye wheel? An echoing voice filled the air, ethereal and profound. Looking around, it was a strange and mysterious world made entirely of crystal-clear mirrors. At this moment, Chun Qing, Chun Xiu, and Gu Ting stood in the world formed by the mirrors, their gazes solemn. "Where do you think Brother Jian is?" Chun Xiu said worriedly. "Don't worry. That fellow won't be able to do anything to Brother Jian for the time being." Chun Qing consoled him. "But right now, we need to figure out where we are." At this moment, Gu Ting, who had been silent for a long time, spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. "Have you noticed anything different behind us?" Chun Qing and Chun Qiu did not understand his meaning and instinctively turned to look behind them. What they saw was three figures emerging from the mirror world behind them. After recognizing the faces of those three figures, even the more composed Chun Qiu could not help but curse. What the hell? How could it be us? The three figures emerging from the mirror world were identical to Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, and Gu Ting down to the smallest detail. Even their walking posture was indistinguishable. It was precisely because of this that Chun Qiu became instantly alert. There's something strange here. I'm afraid these guys are all copies. Be careful, Chun Qiu warned in a low voice. In the next moment, the three figures from the mirror world moved like phantoms and instantly charged toward them. Everyone, be careful, Chun Qing shouted angrily, then spread his fingers, releasing a powerful yen power defensive barrier. But on the other side, Chun Qing, who was the leader, also moved. He also raised his arm and blasted out a violent yen power. The six figures started to fight. At the same time, Jian Wushuang, who had been dragged into the I Will world by Qin Tuo, also encountered this crisis. Qin Tuo disappeared into who knows where, replaced by a figure who shared the same height and appearance as Jian Wushuang. He frowned, taking a step back and assuming a defensive posture. The Jian Wushuang, opposite him, had calm eyebrows and eyes. With a flip of his hand, an invisible sword, emitting a faint golden aura, appeared. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. He did not expect that the image could condense an invisible sword. The invisible sword was his sword Dao incarnation, and if the illusion could create it, it meant it had also mastered the Wushuang sword Dao. Before they even began fighting, the hidden cards were revealed, which made things extremely tricky for Jian Wushuang. As expected, when the representation of the Wushuang sword Dao, the crimson gold sword intent, surged, the Jian Wushuang illusion released its sword intent. Wushuang sword Dao, Star River Lake Sea sword intent. First stance. Star. The sword slashed down, splitting the sky and splitting the earth. A natural chasm was cut open in the void, and the mirror under his feet shattered instantly but recovered at an even faster rate. Jian Wushuang had never imagined that one day he would experience the taste of his own sword Dao. Countless crimson gold columns that reached the heavens burst apart, and an endless sword intent swept forth. At that moment he also made his move. It was also the first move of the Wushuang sword Dao's first move. A more grandiose and unrestrained sword intent surged, obscuring the sky and enveloping everything in a brilliant display of sword intent. The two collided, and the great supreme fluctuation directly swept through the sky. Boom! The mirror world began to crumble and shatter, tearing apart a natural chasm. The sword intents canceled each other out and were destroyed. When the dust cleared, they looked at each other. Jian Wushuang did not expect that the image could replicate the Wushuang sword Dao without any reduction in power. This made the situation even more challenging. If they continued to fight, they might get stuck in a stalemate. With this in mind, Jian Wushuang decided to leave directly. However, the projection seemed to know what he was planning and immediately released the second move of the Wushuang sword Dao, River. As the second move of the Wushuang sword Dao, the river sword intent was extremely powerful, second only to the lake sword intent. Billions of strands of sword intent converged into a majestic heavenly river, descending from the void. This heavenly river was so vast that it blocked the entire void, and its terrifying sword intent made everything tremble. This was the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed as he felt the danger. In the next moment he also took action. The golden sword intent surged around him, quickly converging into a heavenly river, rushing forward suddenly. Two heavenly rivers, two river sword intentions, clashed completely. This was the supreme sword intent, capable of easily tearing apart any heavenly region. Even a grand yen immortal would be unable to withstand it. The bizarre world within the mirror could not repair itself as quickly as it was being destroyed. In just an instant, the entire world crumbled. As the fragments scattered, the river sword intent dissipated, and the Jian Wushuang image retreated 100 yards. Jian Wushuang also suffered considerably, his vital energy and blood surging dangerously, narrowly avoiding severe injuries. The pressure of the Wushuang sword Dao was almost unbearable even for him. The image was obviously in worse shape, with divine blood spilling from its wounds. Courting death, Jian Wushuang said coldly. However, the image seemed to fully recover in a short time, its gaze turning icy as it looked at him. Then, a brilliant golden light quietly rose from the image's body, quickly ascending into the sky and transforming into countless strands of flowing golden tassels. Jian Wushuang's gaze suddenly focused, and his steady heart began to beat faster. It was actually the strongest move in his sword principle. The image intended to unleash the lake sword intent. The lake sword intent was a sword strike that surpassed imagination. It was a sword strike beyond imagination, unstoppable and incomparable, a move that could only be endured. Once the lake sword intent appeared again, the consequences would be unimaginable. Back then, Jian Wushuang had used the lake sword intent to kill the immortal lord of the Nine Heavens Chang Duoling by himself. That guy was already a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Killing a 3 revolutions with one sword strike was unimaginable. No matter how strong Jian Wushuang was, he was still a Yen Immortal. Facing the lake-style sword intent, he had no confidence in enduring it. The brilliant golden radiance had turned into countless tassels, constructing the heavenly gate. The Jian Wushuang image was enveloped by the golden radiance, its face darkening and a cold smile appearing at the corner of its mouth. But then, in the next moment, its expression changed dramatically, filled with disbelief. The heavenly gate, which represented the lake-style sword intent, was still being constructed. However, the image's expression contorted, looking terrified, as if encountering something uncontrollable. His attire, originally pale white, suddenly shattered, revealing a well-proportioned immortal body. Then, his immortal body suddenly expanded several times to the extreme. Cracks spread on his immortal body, and divine blood began to spill out. Jian Wushuang retreated. He sensed that something was wrong and frowned. Could it be that he can't withstand the power of the lake-style sword intent? As if to confirm his thoughts, the image began to scream in pain. Dark red blood light started to drill out of his immortal body and dissipated. After 10 breaths, the image shattered under Jian Wushuang's gaze. As the strongest sword technique of the Wushuang sword Dao, the image vanished with the wind, not even completely forming the heavenly gate. Wow, he actually killed himself. Sword Wushuang pondered for a moment but quickly became vigilant again. This mirrored world was far more intricate than he had imagined, and he had to be cautious. Qin Tuo was definitely not dead but concealed somewhere here. What he needed to do now was to flush him out. After the confrontation with the river sword intent, the mirrored world had completely disintegrated but was now slowly recovering. Looking around, it was all emptiness and silence. Sword Wushuang tried calling out the names of Chen Qing, Chun Qiu, and the others, but there was no response. Stepping on the mirrored surface reflecting his shadow, he walked forward slowly. Everything was eerily silent to the extreme, with only the shadows keeping him company. After walking 1,000 steps, Jian Wushuang halted his steps and suddenly spoke, "Have you had enough?" In the next moment, he stomped his foot, shattering the mirror surface, and a dark red blood aura rose into the air. Qin Tuo's face turned cold, and he stared fiercely at Jiang Wushuang in midair. Sword unrivaled could not be bothered with idle talk. A constellation of 7 stars appeared between his eyebrows, and he summoned an immortal style with a wave of his hand. Little Mountain River. A divine mountain suddenly rose from the ground, forming a cage to imprison Qin Tuo, while the galaxy turned into chains that directly entwined around him. Then heavenly fire descended, consuming everything. This was the first time Jian Wushuang had used an immortal style since emerging from the endless sea. He was growing, and so were his techniques, far surpassing what they had been before. Qin Tuo was imprisoned deep in the mountains and bound by the celestial river. He was unable to extricate himself. Jian Wushuang walked slowly to his side, extinguishing the burning heavenly fire with a wave of his hand, looking at him calmly. "Where are they exactly?" Qin Tuo gritted his teeth. the terror of life and death forcing him to finally yield. Seeing him hesitate, Jian Wushuang did not press further, but instead flicked his finger, sending a pure strand of sword intent into his immortal body. Ah! Qin Tuo screamed in agony as the strand of sword intent crazily traversed his meridians, shattering them completely with each pass. A pain so unbearable that even a grand Yen immortal couldn't endure it. Jian Wushuang did not speak but continued to force more strands of sword intent into his immortal body. Divine blood spewed, and Qin Tuo could not hold on any longer. They are all inside. When he heard this, he raised his brows slightly. After which, he looked at the world formed by the prism mirrors and pondered whether Qin Tuo's words were true or false. After a moment, Sword Unrivaled spread his 5 fingers and released his yen power, smashing the mirror surface beneath his feet. Boom! Boom! The earth shattered rapidly, and dark red blood auras gushed out from the cracks. If I had destroyed this place without finding them, you would have met a fate worse than death, Jian Wushuang said coldly, then fully released his yen power, shattering the void. The extremely violent yen power exploded, causing even Qin Tuo to tremble. The entire mirror world was on the verge of shattering. However, in the next moment, a huge dark red eye will appeared in the void. With a captivating and intimidating aura, it stared directly at Jian Wushuang. Disgust rose in his heart. A million sword intent suddenly appeared behind him and swept toward the eye wheel. This time, the eye did not swallow or absorb the sword intent. It allowed the sword intent to slaughter it until it turned into powder. Seeing this, Qin Tuo was astonished and could not believe his eyes. As the eye disintegrated, the world that was rapidly repairing itself ceased its restoration, entering a state of final collapse. Qin Tuo's aura also rapidly withered. The independent world in this eye will completely collapsed, and they returned to the real heavenly region plane. Above the ruins of the Shangzhen sect, Chunqing, Chunqiu, and Guting were all pleasantly surprised. They've come back? Immediately afterward, another bull-like figure fell from the sky and crashed into the ruins. With 2 more plop sounds, 2 figures stacked on top of each other landed on the back of the bull-like figure. Sichui Jing and Liujia? Chunqing was first shocked, then overjoyed. Good heavens, they're all back! Chunqiu hurried forward and pulled them up from the ruins. After checking that they were all sleeping soundly and were not seriously ill, he heaved a sigh of relief. What about Brother Jian? Chunqing turned his head and hurriedly looked around. Gu Ting pointed forward and swallowed with difficulty. Following his finger, Jian Wushuang stood in the ruins, holding Qin Tuo's neck in one hand, looking calm. Divine blood splattered, and he had almost become a man of blood, his life hanging by a thread. Release my son! A feeble voice rang out as Qin Zun, the sect master of the Shangjuan sect, stumbled out of the ruins, rushing toward Jian Wushuang. But soon, his path was blocked, and a slender short sword pierced through his immortal source. Chun Qiu retrieved the short sword, and Qin Zun fell, collapsing into rubble. Jian Wushuang did not pay attention to what was happening on the other side. All his focus was on Qin Tuo. Then, Qin Tuo smiled. I never expected this. I ascended to the Grand Yen Immortal only to fall in the hands of a Yen Immortal in the end. Truly ironic. After uttering these words, he fell directly, his immortal body shattering into pieces. Jian Wushuang was surprised to find that Qin Tuo had no immortal source, or perhaps, his immortal source had shrunk to a certain extent, nearly disappearing, nothing like the immortal source a Grand Yen Immortal should possess. Before Jian Wushuang could investigate further, a transparent crystal, as clear as a mirror, hovered in the air and rotated slowly after Qin Tuo's immortal body shattered. Jian Wushuang immediately thought of the previous crystal world and the eye wheel that possessed the power to beguile. Could there be a connection between them? He did not understand and reached out to receive the crystal. Under the sunlight, Jian Wushuang's face was reflected on each of the 6 sides of the crystal. For some reason, after seeing this rhombus crystal, the vague sense of familiarity in his heart suddenly became stronger. However, Jian Wushuang was almost certain that he had never seen this crystal before. No way. Could this crystal be the heaven-patterned bone armor that carries Master's information? However, he quickly rejected this idea. The form of the heaven-patterned bone armor was very simple. It used some unknown bone piece as a carrier to engrave unknown words. Moreover, judging from the heaven-patterned bone armor in his hand, each one of them had existed for too long and was barren. Jian Wushuang guessed that these bone armors had existed for a long time, probably longer than the ancient era. It was also because of the fact that the form of the heaven-patterned bone armor was too simple that he was certain that the crystal in his hand could not be a carrier of words. But what's with this inexplicable sense of familiarity? Jian Wushuang frowned and kept rubbing the six-sided crystal. It was not until this moment that he discovered that when viewed from a certain angle, there was actually a vertical pupil in the center of the six-sided crystal. The vertical pupil was incredibly vivid, as if it contained life, and when Jian Wushuang looked at it, it seemed to make eye contact with him, almost at the same time as their eye contact. He felt a rapidly encroaching and enticing power that he couldn't resist, quickly eroding his divine sense. Jian Wushuang was shocked. He used perfected divine sense to cancel out the bewitching power. At this moment, Cui Jing's anxious voice sounded. "Big brother Jian, are you all right?" He raised his head and saw Cui Jing, Feng Shan, and the others surrounding him. They were all looking at him anxiously. Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief. "I'm fine. It's good that you're all here. You gave us a scare, boss. You've been standing here for 2 or 3 hours. We thought you were about to have a breakthrough," Feng Shan said casually. "It wasn't until we saw your pale face that we realized something was wrong." 2 or 3 hours? Jian Wushuang's heart trembled, clearly understanding the significance of this. What had been completed in an instant had somehow passed 2 or 3 hours in the blink of an eye. There was only one possibility. When he locked eyes with the vertical pupil within the Ling crystal, he had inadvertently been drawn into an illusion. However, because his divine sense had already reached a perfected state, the vertical pupil could not further entice him. Jian Wushuang let out a sigh of relief. He had a vague understanding of the prism crystal true eye in his palm. It was impossible for Qin Tuo or even the Shangjuan sect to have such a thing. It was too treacherous. For some reason, Jian Wushuang felt a strong sense of familiarity. But other than that, he knew nothing else. After hesitating for a moment, Jian Wushuang put the prism crystal true eye into his bosom. "It's really unexpected that the entire sect would self-destruct into extinction," Chun Qing sighed. "Well, at least we don't have to do the dirty work ourselves." With one last glance at the now-ruined heavenly region plane, Jian Wushuang and Chun Qing turned away. As one of the top super forces in the Great Sea region, Shangjuan sect's sphere of influence already included nearly 15 heavenly regions, and the disciples they cultivated were spread all over the heavenly regions. However, after this battle, the core of the sect was reduced to ruins, and the sect master and elders were all dead. The Shangjuan sect had declined from then on. Cui Jing, Feng Shan, Wei Liujia, and the others were safe and sound. They returned to the Six Heavens realm. To Jian Wushuang, this was just a small interlude after he woke up. There was no earth-shaking battle. Only the prism crystal true eye left him feeling uneasy. After returning to Little Lonely Heaven, just as Jian Wushuang was about to carefully examine the prism crystal true eyes, the young emperor arrived at Little Lonely Heaven. "No, brother Jian, prepare well. Uncle Yu has come from the heavenly court to see you." Walking into the hall and finding everyone gathered there, the young emperor straightened his clothing and spoke seriously. The others exchanged glances and then looked at Jian Wushuang together. Jian Wushuang was also slightly surprised. He did not know why Uncle Yu had come to find him. After pondering for a moment, he nodded and stood up. "Big brother will go with you." Cui Jing stood up and said. Jian Wushuang shook his head. "No need. I'll be back soon. It's not a big problem. Let's go. Uncle Yu has been waiting for a long time." The young emperor raised his eyebrows and smiled. Then, the two stepped into the air and disappeared. "Big brother Jian, are you sure there won't be any problems on this trip?" Cui Jing stood in front of the hall, expressing some concern. What could go wrong? Even if Emperor Zhen Weiwang himself came, Brother Jian would handle it with ease. Chun Qing said confidently. Let's continue our diligent practice and catch up to Brother Jian's pace. Since entering the great solitude sky, Jian Wushuang had been frowning as if he were reminiscing about something. He found that his memory seemed to have some gaps, with a certain period of it being blurry, no matter how hard he tried to remember what had happened. He only vaguely remembered that Uncle Yu was abnormally powerful. At the end of the Endless Sea, it was Uncle Yu who appeared and brought him out of the Endless Sea. However, the memories after the Endless Sea became exceptionally fuzzy, and he couldn't recall them no matter how hard he tried. Could some of these memories be related to Uncle Yu? Jian Wushuang furrowed his brow, naturally associating his missing memories with Uncle Yu. Perhaps he could see the worry in his heart. The young emperor smiled and comforted him. Don't worry too much. Uncle Yu is here this time to return something you left with him. I hope so, Jian Wushuang replied. At the same time, he felt a little uneasy. After all, not only were the true souls of the three emperors stored in the Boyang bottle, but more than half of his fortuitous encounters and trump cards were also inside. Regardless of what was inside, if Uncle Yu or Zhen Wuyang discovered it, the consequences would be dire. So Jian Wushuang's heart was still heavy. When he entered the heavenly palace where the young emperor resided, a black-robed elder seemed to have been waiting there for a while. He smiled and said, "Young friend, long time no see." Jian Wushuang cupped his hands in return. "Greetings, Uncle Yu. There's no need to be so formal. Let's sit down and have a chat." Uncle Yu smiled and pulled him to his seat. The young emperor sat down next to Uncle Yu and said with a smile, "What a rare guest, Uncle Yu. How could you bear to leave the heavenly court and come to my place?" Uncle Yu chuckled. "Of course, there's an important matter to discuss, or else I wouldn't have the leisure to travel through the heavenly realms. Get to the point, I want to hear if it benefits me." He winked, showing some excitement. Uncle Yu shook his head with a smile. "This time you won't get a share. I'm here mainly to return some things to my young friend, something he left with me." Saying that, Uncle Yu reached into his waist and placed a small jade bottle, green and white intertwined, on the table. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed, and his heartbeat quickened. This green and white jade bottle was no ordinary item. It was the Boyang bottle. The Boyang bottle, within which 3,000 worlds grand worlds could be hidden, was known as the Infinite Bottle. It was the companion of Emperor Yangjun. Always worn by Jian Wushuang, all the opportunities and items he had acquired since arriving in the Great Yen domain were hidden within the Boyang bottle. Now that he saw the Boyang bottle again, Jian Wushuang tensed up. The expression on the young emperor's face also momentarily became unnatural, but he quickly smiled and said, "Uncle Yu, the journey from the heavenly court to the Sixth Heavens realm is quite far, and you must be a bit tired. I've already prepared some fine wine." Uncle Yu waved his hand and looked at Jian Wushuang with a gentle gaze. "Young friend, this item belongs to you." He nodded. "That's good. Now that it's returned to its original owner, I can rest easy," Uncle Yu said with a smile. Jian Wushuang cupped his hands in thanks and quickly put away the Boyang bottle. He added, "Oh right, I haven't opened this small bottle of yours. It's always in its initial state." With just a cursory glance, Jian Wushuang knew that the Boyang bottle had indeed never been opened, and the faint sealed aura still lingered. He heaved a sigh of relief and then cupped his hands in relief. Uncle Yu smiled and nodded. "Young friend, you don't have to be so polite. This is what I should do. Take a look and see if there's anything missing." Jian Wushuang did not even look at it. He tied the Boyang bottle to his waist and said, "Uncle Yu jests. The fact that you have returned what I have lost is already my good fortune. If I were to investigate further, I would truly be a petty person." "Ha ha!" Uncle Yu laughed. "Interesting, how amusing. Don't be coy. Did you come all this way just to deliver a little bottle?" The young emperor asked as he shook his head. "Did you bring any treasures with you?" "You, indeed, can't hide anything from me," Uncle Yu said helplessly. "Of course, I've brought treasures for you. Quickly show them to me, the young emperor said eagerly. This time's treasure is extraordinary. Uncle Yu appeared quite mysterious as he casually brushed his hand, and a palm-sized jade box landed on the desk. Jian Wushuang's eyes moved slightly and he roughly guessed what was in the jade box. The young emperor impatiently opened the box, and the hall was immediately filled with brilliant light and a rainbow of colors. The incredibly rich fragrance of medicine almost solidified, bringing a sense of refreshment and joy upon inhaling it. Inside the jade box were 2 pills. The pill was almost transparent, and the supreme fate energy contained within it was like a cloud that rose and spun. With just one glance, Jian Wushuang knew that these 2 pills must be Zhen Wuyang's painstaking work. In fact, the value of these 2 pills was even higher than Emperor Lu Ye's emperor-grade pills. This was because he could feel that the fate energy contained in these 2 pills had long surpassed the power of the Yen immortal realm and had reached a different level. Who could condense the fate energy of a grand Yen immortal into a pill? Only an emperor. When he opened the jade box and saw that it contained pills, the young emperor could not hide the disappointment in his eyes. There's nothing special about this. The only one who could disdain pills of this level was probably young emperor. Even an ordinary Yen immortal, with even the most mediocre aptitude, would ascend to the rank of a grand Yen immortal within a year of consuming one of these pills. This was the terrifying level of these 2 pills. Uncle Yu smiled. Yenner, you just have to try. Leave the rest to. Before he could finish his sentence, the young emperor raised his head and swallowed the 2 pills like he was eating beans. I ate it, but it didn't seem to have any effect. The young emperor rubbed his belly and raised his eyebrows at Uncle Yu. Indeed, when the 2 pills were ingested, there was no awe-inspiring scene as expected, not even a hint of mystical change. It was as if they had disappeared without a trace. Who asked you to eat both of them? The corner of Uncle Yu's eyes twitched. One of them was supposed to be for young friend Jian Wushuang. The young emperor's eyes widened. Ah? Why didn't you say so earlier? Do you want me to spit it out? Uncle Yu smiled bitterly. You are always so impatient. He scratched his head. You can't blame me, Uncle Yu. You didn't explain yourself. Then, Uncle Yu looked at Jian Wushuang apologetically. Wushuang, it's my fault. I'll ask the emperor for another one for you. Hearing that, Jian Wushuang shook his head hurriedly. Uncle Yu, you don't have to do that. I've never done anything good for the heavenly court, and receiving this pill would make me feel undeserving. I can't bear it. Besides, it's the correct choice to let young emperor eat both pills. Please don't make things awkward for me, Uncle Yu said with some difficulty. But this pill was given by the emperor to thank you for protecting the young emperor back then. There's really no need. The pill is too precious. I definitely can't accept it. Jian Wushuang shook his head firmly. He understood the importance of these pills. They guaranteed the ascent of a Yen immortal to a grand Yen immortal without fail, which was simply incredible. Once he accepted this pill, it would be equivalent to accepting heavenly court's favor. Moreover, this favor was too heavy, he would definitely not bear it. From the looks of it, the 2 pills had been eaten by the young emperor. It was the best way to deal with it. Uncle Yu wanted to say more, but the young emperor spoke up. All right, Uncle Yu, don't be so conflicted. At most, you can just send another one over. The most important thing now is to return to the heavenly court as soon as possible. Upon hearing this, Uncle Yu could not help but smile and cry. You brat, am I really that unwelcome here? After some more conversation, Uncle Yu left. Only Jian Wushuang and the young emperor were left in the huge heavenly palace. He's finally gone. The young emperor heaved a sigh of relief and raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? Jian Wushuang didn't understand. What the young emperor did next made him widen his eyes. He reached out and wiped his mouth. 2 pills that contained supreme fate energy fell into his palm again. Didn't you eat them? Jian Wushuang exclaimed in shock. The young emperor smirked triumphantly. Of course not. You should know my condition. These pills are useless for me. I could eat 1,000 of them, and they wouldn't have any effect. So, I pretended to eat it and hid it in my mouth, With that, he handed the 2 pills directly to Jian Wushuang. "Instead of letting them go to waste, I'd rather give them to you." Looking at the 2 pills in his hands, Jian Wushuang still resolutely gave them away. Looking at the 2 pills brimming with fate energy in his hand, Jian Wushuang still insisted, "If you don't take them, then you might as well throw these pills away. They are just useless junk to me." But Jian Wushuang swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth and let out a sigh. Actually, what he really wanted to say was that these 2 pills were supreme treasures for ordinary Yen Immortal cultivators, but they had little use for him. At this point, Jian Wushuang could basically confirm that his upper limit was the Yen Immortal cultivation realm. As for the Grand Yen Immortal realm, or even the realm of Imperial Emperor, they were almost out of his reach. So, these 2 pills, which contained the fate energy of a Grand Yen Immortal, were something he could not really benefit from. But he couldn't say all of this out loud, so he could only hold the 2 pills with a bitter smile. "I think I'll soon meet a Grand Yen Immortal," the young emperor said with a smile. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid it won't be that easy." The young emperor did not comment. After Jian Wushuang left Big Lonely Heaven and returned to Little Lonely Heaven, Cui Jing and the others surrounded him. "Brother Jian, what's the situation? Is it from the heavenly court? Did they give you some extraordinary treasure?" Facing these questions, Jian Wushuang patiently answered them one by one, and of course he also mentioned the matter of the 2 pills. "No way, are there really pills like that?" Cui Jing was completely shocked. Not only Cui Jing, but Chun Qing and the others were also shocked. Pills that could guarantee the promotion of Yen Immortal cultivators to Grand Yen Immortal actually existed. Chun Qing muttered in astonishment. "My goodness! If these were placed in the eternal Wushuang auction house, I'm afraid the entire Great Sea region would compete for them." "No, this matter cannot be leaked. Only you all can know about it," Swordless said with some seriousness. With his reminder, Chun Qing and the others realized the seriousness of the situation. If the news of this pill were to spread out, countless heavenly regions would be shocked. The eternal Wushuang auction house was just an auction house, and it could not withstand too many variables. Therefore, this matter could not be spread. Then Jian Wushuang waved his hand and placed the 2 pills on the table. "These are the 2 pills. I have no use for them." Chun Qing, Chun Xiu, Cui Jing, Feng Shan, and Wei Liujia looked at each other and shook their heads in unison. "Brother Jian, we don't need these pills. It wouldn't be a waste for you to use them," Chun Qing said with a smile. Chunqiu also nodded. "Brother Jian, what Brother Chen said is correct. Over these 20,000 years, just consuming emperor-grade pills, we've had no less than several hundred of them. The medicinal effects have accumulated in our bodies, enough to support us in breaking through. Indeed, these pills are better off with you, Brother Jian." "I'm afraid I couldn't handle the potency," Cui Jing said, waving his hand. Feng Shan rubbed his palms together. "I've never taken pills. I believe in natural progression." "Same here," Wei Liujia added with a smile. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly. He knew what they were thinking. "Brother Jian, try to break through again. Perhaps this is an opportunity," Chun Qing earnestly suggested. "I look forward to seeing how far you'll grow after becoming a Grand Yen Immortal." Chun Xiu smiled and said, "That's right. Brother Jian, hurry and grow stronger. The eternal Wushuang needs your protection." Jian Wushuang decisively shook his head. "At least in the short term, I won't attempt to break through to the realm of the Grand Yen Immortal. I have more important things to do. These 2 pills will be kept in the hall. Whoever first has the breakthrough opportunity must take one. Remember, only by becoming stronger can you stand in this vast world." At this moment, Chun Qing, Chun Xiu, Cui Jing, Feng Shan, and Wei Liujia all nodded solemnly. It was precisely because they weren't strong enough yet that they had been led by Qin Tuo and narrowly escaped from irreparable harm. Then, Cui Jing asked, "Big Brother Jian, you mentioned there's something important to do. Are you leaving again?" Jian Wushuang shook his head and smiled. "Not leaving for now. I'll rest and contemplate for a while." Chun Qing, Chun Xiu, and the others exchanged glances and then revealed mischievous smiles. "In that case, Let's have a hearty celebration for 10 days and 10 nights. Well, that doesn't seem right. My injuries haven't fully healed yet. A gentle breeze blew past, and the heavenly palace stood tall for eternity. At this moment, Jian Wushuang was lying on the roof of the heavenly palace, holding a jade bone plate in his left hand and staring at it in a daze. It had been nearly 20,000 years since he had obtained the first heaven-patterned bone armor. And in these nearly 20,000 years, so much had happened that he didn't even have time to search for the solution to the heaven-patterned bone armor. However, for now, everything had come to a temporary halt. Except for the fact that Di Qing was still missing, Jian Wushuang had had some time to search for and unlock the secrets of the heaven-patterned bone armor. At this moment, he held 2 pieces of heaven-patterned bone armor related to his master, Xianxia, and knew that there was another piece in the possession of Lady Yinling. There were 3 pieces of bone armor in total, but it wasn't enough to reveal much useful information. Jian Wushuang guessed that there must be at least 10 pieces of heaven-patterned bone armor. Collecting all of these bone armors was nothing short of a fantasy for him. Therefore, Jian Wushuang decided to start by deciphering the inscriptions on the known bone armor in his possession. The inscriptions on this bone armor were ancient and obscure, far beyond his ability to comprehend on his own. Therefore, Jian Wushuang immediately thought of the brief conversation he had with the young emperor. In the entire Great Sea region, those who could decipher difficult and obscure inscriptions were extremely rare, especially ones as ancient and enigmatic as these. However, there were exceptions, and one such exception was Su Tuo, the unparalleled divine craftsman of the Great Sea region, who resided in the Sansuan Mountain. He had a passion for forging supreme treasures and delving into difficult and obscure inscriptions. Jian Wushuang felt that he could ask the divine craftsman Su Tuo for help. He had already started to plan to rest for a while more before heading to Sansuan Mountain. Just as Jian Wushuang was lost in his thoughts, Cui Jing's words brought him back to reality. Big brother Jian, when did you get this bracelet on your wrist? Why haven't I seen it before? When he heard this, he subconsciously looked at his wrist. Only then did he realize that there was a bracelet on his left wrist. How come I don't recall having this bracelet before? Jian Wushuang was also surprised. The bracelet on his wrist had a rustic appearance with depictions of mountain ranges and flowing water, exuding a majestic and powerful aura. After pondering for a moment, he began trying to remove the bracelet from his wrist. However, he quickly realized that this bracelet was no ordinary item. It contained a captivating, imprisoning power. Could it be from Prince Yen or Uncle Yu? Did they put it on me? Jian Wushuang frowned and thought about it, but he quickly rejected all these thoughts, because there wasn't a single Yen immortal who could put a bracelet on his wrist without him knowing. Yet, such a thing had undeniably occurred, and if it weren't for Cui Jing's reminder, Jian Wushuang might not have even noticed this change. He had a strange intuition that this bracelet seemed to be imprisoning something. But what exactly it imprisoned, he had no way of knowing. No way, boss. You don't know who put this bracelet on you. Cui Jing was surprised. Then he lowered his voice and said, Do you think it's the young emperor? Jian Wushuang did not say anything, but he had a rough idea. He had left the Endless Sea, and it was Uncle Yu who had taken him out, and during this period his memory was fragmented. He could hardly recall what had happened, and this ancient-looking bracelet was very likely worn on him during the time he was unconscious. As for who did this, Jian Wushuang had also made a rough judgment. But why would they put such a thing on me? He frowned and then, as if realizing something, sat up and began to meditate on the spot. His yen power surged like a torrent, flowing endlessly through his meridians. His immortal styles, yen power, and sword principles were all intact, and even surpassed his previous abilities, reaching an astonishing level. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. The bracelet did not confine any of his abilities. It was precisely because of this that he felt that it was extremely strange. Since there was no restriction, what was the meaning of this bracelet? After pondering for a moment, Jian Wushuang decided to put this matter aside for now and would ask the young emperor about it when he saw him. For nearly 20,000 years, they rarely gathered together, and now they were all sitting or lying on the eaves of the heavenly palace, leisurely resting. Jian Wushuang also rarely stopped his busy schedule and enjoyed a moment of peace. Then, he took advantage of the fact that everyone, including Xianxia, was present and announced his plan to leave. Upon hearing this, Cui Jing quickly got up and eagerly said, "Boss, take me with you this time. Take me along. Step aside. It's my turn this time." Feng Shan, with his massive body, also squeezed over. "Fair competition, fair competition," Chun Qing insisted, not willing to fall behind. Watching this noisy scene, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but smile, and then said seriously, "Everyone, calm down. This time when I go, I don't know when I'll be able to come back, so none of you can accompany me. What you need to do now is to raise your strength as much as possible. Only then can you truly establish yourself in the great Yen domain." At this moment, Chun Qing and the others became serious and began to ponder. Without exception, they pulled their thoughts to the distant future and the vast and unpredictable great Yen domain. The great Yen domain was not only a mysterious and ultimate boundless universe for Jian Wushuang, but also for Chun Qing and the others. None of them had stepped out of the Great Sea region. The Great Sea region was too vast, countless Yen immortals and even grand Yen immortals had yet to walk out. However, such a Great Sea region was merely a drop in the ocean in the great Yen domain. Even Chun Qiu, who was the son of an ancient emperor in the past, could not imagine the vastness of the great Yen domain. So, they pondered the words of Jian Wushuang and began to realize that beyond the Great Sea region was the true vista. At this moment, Chun Qiu's gaze became more determined, and he spoke, "Brother Jian, does that mean that as long as we reach the level of Grand Yen Immortal, we can continue to follow you and explore the even broader realms beyond the heavenly regions?" Chun Qing, Cui Jing, and the others' gazes became heated. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. "Going beyond the even broader and unpredictable world is indeed possible. But for now, your goal is to reach the level of Grand Yen Immortal." Great transcendent immortals were beings who stood at the pinnacle, second only to the emperor. They could create heavenly principles with a breath, an existence beyond description. But ascending to the rank of Grand Yen Immortal was unimaginable for Yen immortals. You see, in the vast and boundless Great Sea region, after the Emperor's War in the ancient era, Grand Yen immortals had become so rare that they could be counted on one hand. There were even rumors that the path to Ascension had been sealed, no longer attainable. But when they saw Qin Tuo, the son of the Shangjuan sect master, ascend to the rank of Grand Yen Immortal, they realized that the path upward was not sealed. It had just become more challenging. Now, Jian Wushuang wanted them to ascend to the Grand Yen Immortal cultivation realm as soon as possible, which indirectly confirmed this point. Only through further cultivation and reaching that height could they truly stand at the peak. At this moment, besides Jian Wushuang, Chun Qing, Chun Qiu, Cui Jing, Feng Shan, and Wei Liujia all nodded heavily. They had already set their hearts on the goal of advancing towards the Grand Yen Immortal. Jian Wushuang's words not only inspired them but also motivated himself to strive for greater heights. As they continued their journey, new mysteries from the distant past began to surface. His teacher Xianxia, Old Master, and not forgetting the Devourer's organization and the Devouring Emperor, these people dominated the Void Universe and almost suppressed Void God. Who were they? Did they leave any footprints in this vast great Yen domain? All of these were like layers of fog that shrouded Jian Wushuang's mind. What he needed to do now was to dispel this fog and unveil the truth. So, he couldn't afford to wait any longer and had to seize the only clue he had: the heaven-patterned bone armor. After spending several decades drinking on the eaves of the heavenly palace, Jian Wushuang left alone, without allowing any other Yen immortals to follow him, as if he had never appeared. As he departed, he went to find the young emperor once again. After learning the approximate location of Sansuan Mountain, where the divine craftsman Su Tuo resided, he finally set out. He could not wait any longer for news about the heaven-patterned bone armor. So, resolutely he set off. Jian Wushuang did not waver in the face of the vast and unknown heavenly regions. Even though the Great Sea region was boundless, it was divided into 7 parts, which corresponded to the 7 princes under Emperor Zhen Wuyang. The location of Sansuan Mountain was mysterious and unpredictable. Sansuan Mountain did not belong to any of the heaven domains in the Great Sea domain. It was ethereal and impossible to find. While countless Yen immortals had tried to find it, seeking the divine craftsman, they had all returned empty-handed. It was rumored that Sansuan Mountain was the most prized work of divine craftsman Su Tuo. It was built with supreme power, and even a grand Yen immortal could not detect it, let alone find it. The Yen Emperor could only give a rough location and was not very clear either. Yet, the approximate location of the Sansuan Mountain happened to be in a troublesome place, Great Mi Heaven. Great Mi Heaven was the heavenly region of the second prince, Prince Zhou. It was also controlled by Prince Zhou, who had the deepest grudge against Jian Wushuang. Although the 3-inch mountain didn't belong to Dami Heaven, it was adjacent to Dami Heaven. Despite all this, Jian Wushuang still set off on his journey and headed toward the boundless and unpredictable expanse. Because of his previous experience, he no longer lost himself in the void. The void was vast, but the Yen immortal travelers were exceedingly rare. Occasionally, a Yen immortal would appear, casting a doubtful glance at Jian Wushuang, and then vanish into the void. Relying on his own speed, it would take him a considerable amount of time to reach the Great Mi Heaven. However, if he used the immortal array formation left behind from the ancient era, it would greatly shorten the journey. But perhaps due to a less than favorable impression of the immortal array, Jian Wushuang stubbornly chose to travel alone. The heavenly regions stretched out beneath him as he flew past with incredible speed. Every heavenly region had countless living beings and cultivators who aspired for more than the mundane. These heavenly regions were just a drop in the ocean in the vast Great Sea region. The Great Sea region was vast beyond imagination, immeasurable. These emotions lingered in Jian Wushuang's divine sense for a moment before they were erased. He continued to move forward in silence. Among those who could traverse countless domains of heaven, every one of them was a Yen immortal. However, not all Yen immortals were virtuous. Often, there were Yen immortals with formidable cultivation but no hope of ascending to the rank of Grand Yen Immortal, and they would ambush passing Yen immortals in the void. It was just like the Yen immortals and top cultivators that Jian Wushuang had met during the voyage. Although Jian Wushuang was still a Yen immortal, his strength had reached a terrifying level. Even Qin Tuo, the son of the Shangjuan sect master who had advanced to the Grand Yen Immortal, could be effortlessly slain by him. So, he paid little attention to the dangers lurking in the void. He was confident that he could emerge unscathed even if facing a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. However, the less he cared, the more danger sought him out. "Hey, traveler! Hand over everything you have and I'll spare your life," a somewhat coarse voice echoed, and then more than a dozen figures suddenly appeared from the void, blocking all of Jian Wushuang's paths. Jian Wushuang furrowed his brow slightly and came to a stop. In the vast void, a lone Yen immortal was the most vulnerable to being ambushed. Among these 18 figures, there were actually 7 Yen immortals and the rest were all top cultivators with profound cultivation. These individuals, who had already reached the pinnacle of their strength, were now engaged in such lowly activities, which made Jian Wushuang feel disgusted. The leader among the 18 figures, a burly man, took a step forward and pointed his halberd at Jian Wushuang. His eyes were full of arrogance, as if he were looking at an item in a store in his eyes. The young Yen immortal in front of him had nothing special except for his ethereal temperament. Jian Wushuang, with a calm and quiet expression, suddenly smiled faintly. "Of course, you've come for a reason, and I'll give everything to you." The burly man was initially stunned by these words, but then he became overjoyed and was about to rush forward. However, a skinny Yen immortal suddenly stopped him and shook his head. "Don't be reckless. Third brother, are you out of your mind? Is it necessary to act like this for a lone Yen immortal?" The burly man shook off the thin Yen immortal's hand and excitedly approached Jian Wushuang. The other Yen immortals also gathered around at the same time. "Don't play tricks. Honestly hand over all your precious treasures, and I will let you go or else." The burly man suddenly released a burst of Yen power that seemed unstoppable. Faced with such a group of top cultivators, Jian Wushuang felt even more disgusted. However, he did not show it. Then, Jian Wushuang closed his palms and a dark green pill appeared in his palm. Instantly, the area within 1,000 miles was filled with an extremely strange medicinal fragrance. Rainbow-colored lights gathered around Jian Wushuang, reaching an unprecedented richness. This pill, appearing in the world, made all the Yen Immortal and top cultivators widen their eyes in disbelief. This pill had surpassed their imaginations. Even though they had never seen it before, the aura emanating from the pill told them that it was a great opportunity. All the Yen Immortals became enthusiastic and almost involuntarily rushed toward the pill. But the next moment, a sudden change occurred. A wisp of delicate sword intent, almost impossible to discern, floated up like a feather and spun in the air. Time seemed to freeze for an instant, and before the frenzy in the eyes of the mad Yen Immortals and top cultivators had dissipated, they suddenly felt a chill in their necks and chests, and then they ceased to breathe. That wisp of gentle sword intent took the lives of 6 Yen Immortals and 11 top cultivators within a breath. If one looked carefully, they would see that their immortal sources and life sources had all been shattered and could not be reconstructed. Their heads, which still had a fanatical look in their eyes, fell into the void and were then torn into pieces by the invisible gale. Concealing his brilliance, Jian Wushuang furrowed his brow. He paid no attention to the corpses of these deceased cultivators but instead gazed into the distance. Over there, a skinny figure had already fled billions of miles away. Long before Jian Wushuang took out the pill, the skinny Yen Immortal had fled without hesitation, putting a considerable distance between them. "He's quite the excellent scout," Jian Wushuang muttered. Although he said so, he had no intention of letting this small variable go unchecked. Furthermore, the direction in which the skinny Yen Immortal fled was in the direction of Great Mi Heaven, so Jian Wushuang naturally gave chase. At this moment, beads of cold sweat trickled from the skinny Yen Immortal's temples. He had employed every trick in the book to escape. He did not even dare to turn his head. He was so scared that his soul almost left his body. If it wasn't for his caution, he would have been dead by now. Now, out of 18 figures, only he had escaped, and he could not help but secretly rejoice. However, this relief did not last long. The skinny Yen Immortal instinctively looked back, and upon doing so, nearly lost all hope. A youth with a calm countenance, who had effortlessly killed 6 Yen Immortals and 11 top cultivators with a wave of his hand, was charging towards him. Despair surged within the skinny Yen Immortal, and he felt a chill creeping over his body as he trembled uncontrollably. An indescribable aura of cold-bloodedness silently swept over him. But this chilling intent did not emanate from Jian Wushuang. It was frigid, icy, and domineering. This murderous intent instantly spread for millions of miles. Jian Wushuang halted his steps at the right moment, raising his eyebrows slightly. This was not just murderous intent. It was also sword intent. To cover such a vast distance in an instant was truly extraordinary. "Do you have to kill them all? Can't you be a bit more merciful?" A voice, as if descending from the heavens, floated up, carrying a touch of cold inquiry as it approached Jian Wushuang. The voice took form, countless ice crystal sword intents descending, capable of obliterating the heavens. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. He waved his hand and an endless breeze swept, reaching into the sky. When the two collided, countless ice crystal sword intents disappeared without a trace in an instant. The sweeping wind cleared the chaotic void, making it impossible for the hidden voice to escape. The chaotic void wind dissipated, revealing a rather slender figure. He had a long sword on his waist and was dressed in black. His face was extremely clear and his eyes were like cold swords, emitting a cold light. In their first encounter, the slender figure with the long sword found himself at a disadvantage, which greatly displeased him and left him somewhat incredulous. However, he quickly concealed his emotions and turned his gaze towards the skinny Yen Immortal kneeling beside him, trembling like a sieve. Then, he spoke. "Hey, why did he want to kill you?" The skinny Yen Immortal shuddered, nearly collapsing in the void. He said in a trembling voice, I don't know, but he has a thirst for blood and killing. All of my companions fell to his hands. If I hadn't run fast enough, I might have also met a gruesome fate. A bloodthirsty killer for no apparent reason? The slender figure clearly did not believe his one-sided account. He turned to Jian Wushuang and asked loudly, "Is what he's saying true?" Jian Wushuang responded indifferently, "True or not, what difference does it make? All right, it seems I've encountered yet another rule-breaker," the slender figure said solemnly. "In that case, you'll have to pay the price." As soon as he said that, an unprecedented sword intent erupted and swept up, causing the void to tremble. Under this sword intent, the skinny Yen Immortal who was shaking like a leaf fainted. Confronted with such a sword intent, Jian Wushuang's gaze also became focused. He sensed a kind of energy fluctuation that did not belong to a Yen Immortal. This guy who did not show his abilities was actually a Grand Yen Immortal. It's worth noting that after the Battle of the Emperors, Grand Yen Immortals had become almost extinct in the entire Great Sea region. However, Jian Wushuang had repeatedly encountered Grand Yen Immortals, and most of them were on opposing sides, which left him feeling quite helpless. To Jian Wushuang, who had experienced the terrifying training of the Endless Sea, a Grand Yen Immortal was nothing. However, a Grand Yen Immortal with a deep understanding of sword principle was enough to give him a headache. And judging solely from the sword intent he had unleashed, Jian Wushuang dared not underestimate him. The slender figure rose with a drawn sword, igniting a magnificent sword intent, and descended directly. Jian Wushuang did not want to engage in prolonged combat, so he unleashed the Wushuang Sword Dao directly. Star River Lake Sea Sword Intent, the first form. Star. A plain and unremarkable straight slash, as the initial move of the complete Wushuang Sword Dao, was rare in its focus on explosiveness. One sword shattered the boundless void, simultaneously bursting with countless rays of light, devouring everything. The slender figure was greatly amazed, completely disregarding the sword intent surrounding him, and swiftly rushed toward Jian Wushuang. Watching this bizarre scene, Jian Wushuang's brow twitched. He obviously hadn't expected that the guy would charge at him like a raging bull. This undoubtedly disrupted his thoughts, but Jian Wushuang did not retreat. He adjusted his state instantly and took the initiative. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Sea Sword Intent, the second form. River. The majestic heavenly river, breaking through the void from every crack, then roaring as it converged. Under this sword strike, even a Grand Yen Immortal would feel their own insignificance. "What a powerful sword move!" the slender figure exclaimed without reservation. "In that case, I'll show you my strongest move too." A colder aura suddenly swept over, centered on the slender figure, and tore through the void. Then, countless sword intents gathered behind him, forming a blazing sun. The blazing sun was radiant, containing 9 crimson golden rays, resembling a golden wheel, circulating behind him. Facing the mighty and overwhelming river sword intent, the slender figure raised his sword suddenly. Where the sword pointed, nothing could resist. At that moment, the brilliant golden radiance burst forth from the sun behind him. The 9 crimson golden rays shot out like 9 true swords, unstoppable. Where the sword pointed, even the heavenly river composed of countless pure sword intents began to shatter. 9 true swords, turning into scorching suns, extinguishing all sword principle. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes, feeling astonished. This was the first time that, apart from sword immortals, another sword Dao could contend with the Wushuang Sword's Dao. As the river form sword intent shattered and dissipated, the 9 sun-like true swords also vanished into nothingness. Jian Wushuang didn't mind this and instead focused on the Grand Yen Immortal. The slender figure appeared unusually excited. "Delightful! I never expected that a Grand Yen Immortal could not only engage me in a sword fight, but also suppress me with just one move." Jian Wushuang looked at him and did not speak. "Your sword principle, did you learn it from someone or develop it yourself? It's not for me to boast, but those who can duel with me, not counting sword immortals, can be counted on one hand. I didn't expect that not only could you spar with me, but you could also outmatch me in one move. You're truly remarkable. Jian Wushuang looked at him. Are you done talking? The slender figure hesitated for a moment, but he did not get angry. Instead, he scratched his head and said, Misunderstanding. It was all a misunderstanding. Since it's a misunderstanding, don't block my way, he said in a calm tone. Also, the person you're protecting is not a good individual, taking pleasure in ambushing lone yen immortals. It just so happened that he and his buddies encountered me, and I casually eliminated them. The slender figure was taken aback again. Then his expression turned cold. I had a feeling that this guy wasn't a good character. It seems my instincts were right. With those words, he reached out and lifted the unconscious and skinny yen immortal. Then, without any hesitation, twisted its head off. After casting another glance at the slender figure, Jian Wushuang turned and left. There was still a considerable distance to the Great Mi Heaven, and he had no reason to waste any time. After passing through thousands of heavenly regions alone, Jian Wushuang stopped and looked back. He saw the slender figure holding the decapitated head of the skinny yen immortal following him. Why are you following me? Jian Wushuang frowned, growing somewhat annoyed. The slender figure smiled and said somewhat embarrassed, There was a misunderstanding earlier, so I wanted to make it up to you. Whether there was a misunderstanding or not, what if he was telling the truth and I was lying? Jian Wushuang said, It's all just one-sided claims. How can we determine the truth? The sword intent. The slender figure suddenly asserted with determination. Your sword intent won't deceive me. To produce such pure sword intent as a yen immortal, if there were impurities in your state of mind, you would never have comprehended this level of swordsmanship. All right, let's put this matter behind us. I'll continue on my way, and you don't need to follow me anymore, Jian Wushuang said before turning and leaving. Tossing the head in his hand into the void, the slender figure watched his departing silhouette. After careful consideration, he still decided to catch up. May I ask, young friend, where are you headed? How about we travel together? He inquired. No. In the vast emptiness, within the boundless universe, even for a yen immortal cultivator traversing through the void, there were still dangers to be found. Traveling together, however, was a preferable way to deal with these perils. Young one, I must admit that your swordsmanship is exceptionally remarkable. But with your current cultivation level, it would be wiser to proceed more cautiously, the slender figure remarked. He kept saying that he was a grand yen immortal, all while getting closer to Jian Wushuang. Finally, Sword Wushuang could no longer endure it. Don't you think that, for me, you are the greatest threat right now? Young friend, you've got it all wrong. I would never be that kind of yen immortal, the slender figure replied with utmost sincerity. He could sense that this individual was nothing more than a pure chatterbox, perhaps having gone years without speaking a word, which explained his incessant rambling. He only shut his mouth in satisfaction when Jian Wushuang had restrained his hostility. However, before long he sighed. In this vast empty void, to have a like-minded companion is truly fortunate. I can't remember how long it's been since I last spoke. Have you always been like this? Jian Wushuang suddenly inquired, interfering in matters across the super-heavenly regions? Building into the business of random heavenly realms. Not entirely, it's mostly because I enjoy meddling in ordinary affairs, the slender figure said with a twitch of his lips. Jian Wushuang shook his head in response and remained silent. What happened earlier was indeed my fault. Young friend, please don't take offense. In truth, I'm quite easy to get along with, he continued. For the sake of making amends, I've decided to protect you throughout this journey. That's hardly necessary, Jian Wushuang said calmly. The slender figure found himself at a loss for how to handle this uncooperative individual. However, he soon felt a sense of satisfaction and continued to follow Jian Wushuang from a distance. Jian Wushuang, on the other hand, couldn't be bothered with such matters and continued soaring into the depths of the void. Jian Wushuang didn't care about this and continued to dive into the depths of the void. The void was vast, and there was still a considerable distance to cover before reaching the Great Me Heaven. As they continued their journey through the void, Jian Wushuang gradually let down his guard, allowing the slender figure to keep pace closely. "Young friend, what are your thoughts on these countless heavenly regions within the void?" the slender figure asked, waving his arm toward the countless planes that resembled stars, a faint smile on his face. Jian Wushuang glanced at him but did not respond. The slender figure paid no attention to that, continuing to speak to himself. "In my opinion, the essence of all existence can be summarized in just 6 words. These 6 words are, enter the dust, transcend the world." As these words were uttered, Jian Wushuang's figure momentarily froze, then returned to a calm demeanor. Indeed, someone who could contend with their own sword principle against the Star River Lake sea sword intent. How could they be an ordinary person? The slender figure observed all of his reactions and couldn't help but smile, saying, "So, young friend, shall I take you on a journey into the dust?" This time, Jian Wushuang did not refuse. "Sure. Then let us journey into the dust." The slender figure laughed heartily and took the lead. And Jian Wushuang, who was originally prepared to go to the Great Me Heaven, was successfully led astray. To enter the dust meant to enter the mortal world and experience the most subtle forms of life. For Yen immortals like Jian Wushuang, the mortal realm was considered impure, and their formidable Yen power could easily dissipate. As a result, very few immortals would set foot in the mortal world. But the slender figure was an exception. He did not care about his own fortune or the dispersion of his Yen power. He entered the mortal world. Without the supreme Tao of heaven and earth, and even in a realm so devoid of Yen power that it could not support the existence of cultivators, 2 figures in plain white robes walked slowly. These 2 figures were Jian Wushuang and the slender figure. The market was bustling and prosperous, filled with ordinary people who could not control or sense Yen power. As Jian Wushuang and the slender figure walked through the market, even though they suppressed their Yen power, their extraordinary aura still attracted many curious gazes. Among the bustling crowd, the slender figure appeared quite relaxed. He somehow produced 2 melons from who knows where, offered one to Jian Wushuang, and when it was politely declined, he simply began munching on it himself. After I reached the heights I aspired to, I stopped and entered one mortal world after another, experiencing the subtle essence of entering the dust. All Yen immortals abandon the mundane world like an old shoe, but I have a different feeling. These mortals, have such short lifespans. At most a century is one cycle for them. I once sat on a high mountain in the mortal realm, watching them cycle through 1,000 lifetimes. The loneliness of life and death touched me. You might not believe it, but the fact that I can ascend to the grand Yen immortal realm has a lot to do with the mortal world. He threw melon husk on the ground and looked at Jian Wushuang. But I always feel that something is missing. He shrugged. Perhaps when I truly comprehend it, it will be the moment my great Tao appears. Listening quietly to the thoughts of a grand Yen immortal, Jian Wushuang said, "That day may never come, or it may only exist in a single thought." "I actually hope that day will never come," the slender figure chuckled. "By the way, we've known each other for so long, and I haven't asked for your name." "Jian Wushuang. I am Nan Xian." After exchanging their names, the 2 of them did not speak anymore and walked forward leisurely. The market was bustling, to say the least. Although there weren't many pedestrians, their gazes were intense and sincere as they looked at the 2 of them. But soon, the pedestrians in the market began to rush forward as if they were joining in on the fun. Let's go, let's go. Have you guys heard? There's a magician from another kingdom. It's said that his magic arts are extremely powerful, and he can conjure anything he wants. Let's all go and take a look." Accompanied by the noisy voices, almost half of the pedestrians gathered in the front. Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian were also carried forward by the crowd. In the end, the pedestrians converged in the depths of the bustling market and stopped to watch in front of a stall covered with various masks. In the center of the stall, a shabby old Taoist with white hair, wearing a Taoist robe, swayed left and right with a cheerful expression. As his body swayed, the bells tied to his waist jingled. "Welcome, dear spectators. This old Taoist has been waiting for you all here for quite some time," he said with a smile, then reached out and took a white monkey mask from the shelf, throwing it onto the table. In an instant, the white monkey mask emitted a puff of smoke, and a long-armed, all-white monkey leaped out from it. The crowd was in an uproar, all amazed by this sight. The transformation of an inanimate object into a living creature was something unimaginable, but it was happening right before their eyes. Even Nanxian, who was a Grand Yen Immortal, blinked in surprise at this moment. He muttered in a hushed tone, "No way, what kind of illusion is this, that it could be so bewildering?" Everyone sighed in amazement, except for the Jian Wushuang, whose eyes showed a hint of suspicion. He sensed a very familiar aura emanating from this old Taoist. That familiar aura was extremely faint, but he sensed it immediately. Jian Wushuang was puzzled. This mortal plane was nothing more than a low-level realm among the countless heavenly realms in the Great Sea region. How could there be an existence that made him feel familiar? Moreover, this sloppy old Taoist had no trace of yen power fluctuations, which essentially ruled out the possibility of him being a cultivator. Unable to figure it out, Jian Wushuang continued to observe. Amidst the commotion of the crowd, the long-armed white monkey leaped from the table and began to bow and greet with an extremely cute appearance. At this moment, the sloppy old Taoist in Taoist robes waved his hand and said, "Monkey, come back here and serve watermelon to the spectators." "Gigi." The white monkey responded and leaped back onto the old Taoist's shoulder. It then extended its claws and began to fumble in the old Taoist's arms. It poised itself and swiftly dug a small pit on the ground, placing the melon seeds inside it. All things in nature grow according to certain rules, but these rules can be broken. "Today, I will break these rules in front of all of you," the scruffy old Taoist said, finishing his sentence and waving his hand over the spot where he buried the melon seeds. In an instant, a mysterious scene unfolded. The soil loosened, and a lush green vine emerged from the ground, breaking through the earth's surface. It was a melon vine, and in just a few breaths, it grew from a seedling to sprawl across the ground, vibrant and green. Then, the scruffy Taoist exhaled, and the small melons on the vine began to grow rapidly, quickly producing a ripe, dripping green watermelon. As the crowd watched this spectacle, the atmosphere became even more charged, and everyone was captivated by this miraculous display. In less than 10 breaths, a single seed had transformed into a massive, impressive melon, a sight that left everyone in awe. "This old Taoist is quite something. He even has me a bit perplexed," the slender figure named Nanxian remarked, stroking his chin in contemplation. Even Jian Wushuang, who had been initially skeptical, gradually calmed down. The sloppy old man laughed loudly. "Since the fruits are ripe, it's time to pick them." As he spoke, he bent down and plucked the only large melon among the vines. "Dear spectators, please take a look. This is not an ordinary melon but a mysterious golden melon," the sloppy old Taoist said, using his hand as a knife to slice open the ripe, dripping green melon. At this moment, everyone held their breath and watched with anticipation. A strand of golden light burst from the crack in the melon. Then, countless strands of golden light emerged together, dazzling and blinding, making it impossible to look directly at them. Everyone instinctively covered their eyes. When the light faded, a chorus of amazed gasps filled the air. Inside the melon that had been cut in half, where the flesh should have been, an endless number of golden seeds were packed. The sloppy old man was very pleased and reached out and took out a golden melon seed from the melon, holding it up to the sky. "This is a gift from the heavens to me and to all of you. Each one of these golden seeds will be distributed to the spectators. There's no need to rush." With these words, the crowd erupted in excitement. To receive a golden seed out of nowhere was enough to drive everyone into a frenzy. Watching the restless crowd, the unkempt old Taoist quickly waved his hand and said, "Hold on, dear spectators. Due to the limited number of golden melon seeds, I have no choice but to set a threshold. This threshold is that one golden melon seed requires 1 coin to purchase. The crowd fell silent, but quickly became agitated again. 1 coin could only buy 3 or 5 steamed buns, but being able to exchange it for 1 golden melon seed was a huge bargain. "I'll take 10. I'm buying 10? A burly man exclaimed, tightly clutching 10 coins and speaking excitedly. "Let me finish first," the sloppy old Taoist continued. "Each person can only buy 1 golden melon seed, and you must blow a breath onto the coin in your hand before you can use it to exchange for a golden melon seed." The same burly man from before impatiently blew on his coins and then handed them over. The old Taoist smiled and accepted the coins, giving out the golden melon seeds in return. This scene deeply stimulated everyone present. Next, the entire scene descended into chaos as everyone rushed to exchange for golden melon seeds. Only Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian remained calmly in their place. "What do you think? Is this old Taoist a Yen immortal who has come from another heavenly region?" Nan Xian asked him. Jian Wushuang's deep gaze seemed to pierce through the crowd, focusing on the central figure. "It's very likely, almost certain." In the next moment, he moved directly, emitting an unimaginable and strange aura that pushed the crowd aside like waves, creating a path. Nan Xian also knew that something was amiss and hurriedly followed up. When they reached the center of the crowd, in front of the stall filled with masks, Nan Xian's brows were already tightly furrowed. At this moment, the sloppy old Taoist was nowhere to be seen, only a long-armed white monkey that looked at them with a mocking expression. Jian Wushuang's eyes darkened as he reached out and slapped the white monkey. The white monkey let out a pitiful cry and transformed back into a mask, falling to the ground. That old guy actually managed to escape? Nan Xian's anger surged. As a true Grand Yen Immortal, not only did he fall for an illusion, but he also let the caster escape. It was undoubtedly humiliating. How could it be him? Shouldn't he be in the endless sea? How could he possibly be here? Jian Wushuang frowned, utterly baffled. Nan Xian said coldly, "Even if I have to dig 3 feet into the ground today, I will find him." Then they both turned their gazes towards the distance. Meanwhile, in the bustling market, a Taoist in tattered robes was running for his life. Due to his hasty steps, he looked rather comical. "No, it's impossible. I must be mistaken. How could it be him? In a place without the flow of yen power, how could I possibly encounter him?" As he continued to flee, the sloppy old Taoist muttered to himself. It seemed he had recalled something terrifying, and his eyes frequently showed signs of fear. The battle had been too terrifying, so much so that even though he had managed to escape by sheer luck, the mere thought of it filled him with immense dread. "As long as I absorb some more fate energy, my injuries will recover. At that time, I can escape wherever I want and no one will be able to find me." As the sloppy old man thought of this, his pace quickened even further. But soon, everything changed. The buildings in the bustling city and the ground under their feet began to shake and tremble. In an instant, the world spun. The unkempt old Taoist only saw a blur before being kicked forcefully to the ground. "Run! Let's see how far you can run!" Nan Xian shouted angrily, using his foot to press down firmly on the unkempt old Taoist. "All right, spare me, kind sir. I haven't done anything against the heavens." "Please, sir, take a closer look," the sloppy old Taoist said as he struggled on the ground. Just then, Jian Wushuang slowly approached him and crouched down. The sloppy old Taoist, who had been planning to continue begging for mercy, shivered when he saw the newcomer's face. He closed his eyes and actually passed out. "Frightened to death?" Nan Xian exclaimed in surprise. Jian Wushuang spoke coldly. "If you pretend to be dead again, you'll really be dead." As soon as he finished speaking, the sloppy old Taoist woke up. He did not even dare to look at him as he crazily knocked his head on the ground. "Please spare my life. Please spare my life," Jian Wushuang said coldly. "Shut up. I don't want to pursue the matter from before." The sloppy old Taoist immediately fell silent, not daring to move. Now Jian Wushuang had recognized that this old Taoist was Zhang Yoxing, the one who had deceived him with overwhelming illusions in the endless sea and stolen his chaos origin sealess fruit. But he had no intention of pursuing the matter further. He only furrowed his brow and asked, "How did you escape from the endless sea? Tell me, are there any cracks in the endless sea to follow?" Upon hearing this, Jiang Yoxing trembled again and then said with a bitter expression, "My lord, there are no cracks in the endless sea. The reason I was able to escape is that I abandoned all my fate energy, and I managed to escape while the heavenly gate was not completely closed." Jian Wushuang didn't believe his words at all and reached out to sense his luck and fortune. After a thorough examination, he found that Jiang Yoxing's current situation matched his account exactly. Only then did he give up. "Let's go," Jian Wushuang said as he stood up, his face showing signs of fatigue. Nanshan was stunned. Then he asked, "So, are we just going to let this go like this?" He did not turn back. "Let him go. There's no point in killing him." Although Nanshan was a little angry, he did not kill Jiang Yoxing in the end. After giving the old Taoist a kick, he left. Jiang Yoxing slowly got up and sat on the ground, lost in thought for a long time. Finally, after one last glance at the receding figure of Jian Wushuang, he disappeared without a trace. This journey into the mortal realm had been extremely turbulent, with the encounter of the biggest variable that disrupted everything. Jian Wushuang no longer had the mood to continue traveling in the mortal world. After hastily appearing, he headed straight in the direction of the Great Mi Heaven. "Young friend, you seem to know that old Taoist from before?" In the void, Nan Shen asked. "I know him. We've met once, and he stole something from me," Jian Wushuang said without hiding anything. He spoke angrily. "I knew that old guy wasn't a good person, and it seems I was right." However, this revelation did not stir any emotions in Jian Wushuang, and he did not harbor any intent to kill Jiang Yoxing when he saw him again. More than anything, there was an indescribable and inexplicable sentiment regarding the grand Yen immortals imprisoned in the endless sea. It was this sentiment that led him to spare Jiang Yoxing. "Young friend, what is your ultimate destination?" Nan Shen inquired. "The Great Mi Heaven." After the battle between the 9 revolutions grand Yen immortals, almost 70% of the entire Great Mi heavenly region had been destroyed. Even though nearly 20,000 years had passed, it had not fully recovered. The remnants of the shattered heavenly region plane were still visible, and everywhere his eyes could see, there was a desolate and bleak atmosphere. "I remember visiting this place in the past. How did it become like this?" Nanshen was quite surprised. In his memory, the Great Mi Heaven was one of the top heavenly regions within the entire Great Sea region. However, at present, it seemed that the Great Mi Heaven had suffered some severe damage and was slowly recovering. He could not possibly imagine that the one who had transformed the Great Mi Heaven into its current state was none other than Jian Wushuang, who was standing beside him. "Little friend, what are you planning to do in Great Mi Heaven?" Nan Shen continued to ask. "I'm looking for someone," Jian Wushuang said calmly and took out a map from his pocket. This map had been drawn by the young emperor himself before Jian Wushuang's departure. However, the map's directions were quite vague, only indicating the general location of the Sansuan mountain. The exact coordinates remained a mystery. To the southwest, the 42nd heavenly region, Jian Wushuang murmured softly, putting the map away, his mind made up. In the vast expanse of the void, the approximate location of the Sansuan mountain was in the southwest. The farther southwest he went, the further away he would be from the heavenly region of Great Mi Heaven, reducing the risk of being pursued by the subordinates of Prince Zhou. However, even though he thought so, things often turned out contrary to his wishes. Just as Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian were about to turn southwest, a deep voice sounded without any warning. "Stop right there, all of you." 7 figures, 7 Yen immortals in total, appeared from all directions and surrounded them. The leader, a young Yen immortal, looked at Jian Wushuang with a cold gaze and a hint of mockery on his lips. "Heavenly official Jian of the 6 heavens realm, what brings you to Great Mi Heaven?" Jian Wushuang was slightly shocked. He did not expect an ordinary Yen immortal to be able to call out his name accurately. After thinking for a moment, he said, I have no intention of causing trouble in Great Me Heaven. We'll leave now. With that, Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian turned to leave. How arrogant. Do you really think you can come and go in Great Me Heaven as you please? The young Yen Immortal sneered and waved his arm. The other 6 Yen Immortals released their Yen power, trapping Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian. His Highness the Second Prince wants to see you. I hope you won't be disrespectful. Before Jian Wushuang could respond, Nan Xian chuckled. Hasn't your master ever taught you to read the situation? The young transcendent immortal furrowed his brow, clearly not paying much attention to Nan Xian. And who are you? I am your grandfather, Nan Xian roared, and without warning, he unleashed a tremendous surge of power from his palm. With an unimaginable speed, it swept across the surroundings. This was the pressure of a grand Yen Immortal. There was no way a Yen Immortal could escape. The leader, the young Yen Immortal, had barely reacted before his immortal body was crushed to dust. The other 6 Yen Immortals fared no better. They all disappeared without a trace. In less than a breath's time, 7 Yen Immortals were nowhere to be seen. A bunch of insignificant pests, daring to obstruct me? Nan Xian's tone was far from friendly, clearly irritated by the consecutive annoyances. After dealing with the trouble, Jian Wushuang knew that he could not stay any longer. So he and Nan Xian disappeared in the southwest direction. Great Me Heaven was vast and contained countless heavenly region planes. In the initial battle, although the core sanctuary of the Great Me Heaven had suffered heavy damage, the peripheral heavenly regions had not been greatly affected. In the southwest, the farthest and coldest region within the entire Great Me Heaven domain, even Yen Immortals rarely ventured here. It was desolate, lacking in Yen power, and filled with the impurities from the ancient era. Looking around, the heavenly region's plains were sparsely visible. Between the 42nd heavenly region, Jian Wushuang frowned and pondered as he continued to move forward in the void. In this Great Me Heaven, although the heavenly regions in the southwest were sparse, it would still take quite some time to search for the Sansuan Mountain if they were to search them one by one. Looking at the heavenly regions arrayed like stars, Nan Xian spoke. Young friend, are you sure the Yen Immortal you're looking for is here? Jian Wushuang nodded. It is indeed here, but I'm afraid it will take some time to find the exact location. We can't stay here for long, Nan Xian added. We just killed the Yen Immortal under the ruler of the Great Me Heaven. They might have already sensed it. If we linger here, we'll likely be discovered soon. Nan Xian's words were not without reason. Given Prince Zhou's disposition, he would certainly not let this opportunity slip by. So Jian Wushuang found himself in a dilemma. He did not know how many trump cards Prince Zhou had up his sleeves. If they clashed again, it would not be easy. Let's retreat from Great Me Heaven for now. We'll make plans after some time. Nan Xian looked at him and said, Or I can accompany you further into the journey. You don't need to do that, Jian Wushuang replied. My affairs shouldn't involve you. Nan Xian raised an eyebrow and smiled. True friends are hard to find, and even harder to find are true friends with whom you can discuss sword principles and the Tao. I don't want to see a friend in a difficult situation. You're a strange fellow. Swordless shook his head, somewhat helpless. However, at this moment the void suddenly shook. Immediately after, the dead and cold void suddenly emitted a dense and surging energy. Speak of the devil so soon? Nan Xian raised his eyebrows in surprise. Relying on the perception of a grand Yen Immortal, he realized that a majestic aura was converging from all directions. Jian Wushuang frowned and had a bad feeling. In the next moment, the once silent and frigid void was suddenly illuminated by pure Yen power. Figures, each capable of shaking the heavens and the earth, ascended from various heavenly region planes, converging together. They were all Yen Immortals. Close to 70 Yen Immortals appeared. They seemed to have been waiting for a long time, waiting for the right time to appear. Each of the evolving Immortals emitted extremely powerful Yen power, and they surrounded Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian with cold gazes. Are they lining up to die? Nan Xian sneered. Between Yen Immortals and Grand Yen Immortals, there was an insurmountable gap that could not be compared. Faced with nearly 70 Yen Immortals, Nanshan alone could easily wipe them out. Jian Wushuang furrowed his brow. After experiencing the endless sea, he had undergone a complete transformation and could easily withstand 70 yen immortals, or even 100 more, without any harm. However, the current Prince Zhou did not know of his change, so he made a wrong judgment. But no matter how mistaken the judgment was, Prince Zhou still attached great importance to it and had set up an ambush with 70 yen immortals. If he hadn't entered the endless sea, these 70 yen immortals would have been enough to severely damage Jian Wushuang, or even successfully besiege him. But now everything had undergone a dramatic change. The 70 yen immortals did not charge in recklessly. Instead, they scattered strategically and connected with each other. Moreover, their yen powers began to condense, forming an immortal formation that resembled a cage that covered the sky. "You want to use an immortal formation to trap me?" Nanshan sneered. His clothes fluttered and his unparalleled yen power exploded. The fate energy and yen power of a grand yen immortal were unquestionably displayed at this moment. The faces of all the yen immortals were filled with shock. How could they have expected that a grand yen immortal would appear among them? Weren't grand yen immortals extinct? He did not even give these yen immortals time to think. Nanshan revealed his decisive side. Rumble. Unparalleled yen power surged from Nanshan as the center, instantly tearing apart the immortal formation constructed by 70 yen immortals working together. And at this moment, Jian Wushuang also moved, pure and dazzling divine patterns quietly flowing around him. Boom! The sky-covering immortal formation was finally torn apart, and the yen power flowed and shattered. The nearly 10 yen immortals facing them had not even reacted yet when Jian Wushuang directly shattered their immortal bodies and erased their immortal sources. None of the yen immortals could get close to him, and wherever his crimson gold yen power passed, even the void was torn into deep ravines. In just one exchange, nearly 20 yen immortals died in Jian Wushuang's hands. Although Nanshan was a grand yen immortal, he could not compare to Jian Wushuang in terms of speed. This also surprised him. How could a yen immortal have such power? But soon Nanshan understood. The fact that Jian Wushuang could stand up to him in a first encounter without falling behind was already unimaginable. "Young friend, truly amazing," Nanshan sighed, then charged once more. 70 yen immortals, even in the entire Grand Sea region, was a terrifying power. Even in ordinary super-heavenly regions, there was no such depth of power. But now, these yen immortals were easily slaughtered. Jian Wushuang hadn't even summoned his invisible sword. With a wave of his hand, all the yen immortals were extinguished. Emerging from the endless sea, his transformation had already surpassed the imagination of all yen immortals, including himself. The undying and imperishable immortal body was like a container that was constantly broken and reshaping. When Jian Wushuang regained control of it, it had already reached a terrifying transformation. He could effortlessly extinguish grand yen immortals like Qin Tuo, who possessed strange powers. How could these yen immortals stop him? In just a short moment of 100 breaths, all 70 yen immortals were wiped out. The void slightly tore apart, shattered immortal bodies, and ownerless immortal sources floated in the void. Jian Wushuang and Nanshan stood with their hands behind their backs, calmly observing this scene. "Young friend, are we leaving or not?" Nanshan turned to ask. This time, Jian Wushuang did not hesitate at all. "Let's go." Erasing 70 yen immortals was undoubtedly a major blow to Prince Zhou. If they did not leave now, he might take drastic measures. Saying so, they left in an instant, flying 100,000 miles away. But in the next moment, the vast void of the Great Mi heaven began to tremble incessantly, and the stars and constellations started to shift. An ancient and silent aura quietly emerged in the vast wilderness. Jian Wushuang's brows furrowed slightly. This aura, it felt both unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. He realized that there was no avoiding it anymore. Accompanied by the tremors in the void, the once silent emptiness began to shift and change colors. A mist, which seemed to appear out of nowhere, billowed up, obscuring everything. "Again," Nanshan said with solemnity. The mist billowed, and a majestic aura filled the air. "Do you truly believe you can act as you wish in Great Me Heaven?" A voice, filled with unparalleled authority, resonated through the empty space like a tolling bell. However, a figure that Jian Wushuang was all too familiar with suddenly appeared. Prince Zhou. Jian Wushuang. In the nearly 20,000 years since they had last met, Prince Zhou's demeanor had undergone a drastic transformation. Now he exuded an intimidating presence, an intangible but palpable aura of supreme authority that filled the entire space. His ink-gold battle armor made him look like an emperor emerging from a sea of corpses. Golden rays emanated from his true eyes, captivating all who looked upon them. And behind Prince Zhou, 20 figures clad in black robes stood in formation, as imposing as mountains and as terrifying as can be. Deathly silence filled the air. Their eyes met. Jian Wushuang looked calm, while Prince looked angry. Veins were popping out of his hand that was gripping the hilt of the sword at his waist. He said angrily, "Jian Wushuang, you've humiliated me time and time again. Do you truly think you can escape punishment?" A thunderous sound reverberated through the void. Following that, Jian Wushuang said, "I have no intention of being your enemy. This time I came to the Great Me Heaven only to find a friend. It's just that my journey didn't go smoothly, and I had to remove some obstructive Yen Immortals along the way. Do you realize that the Yen Immortals you removed were all under my command?" Prince Zhou took a step forward, and his supreme authority bore down directly. Nan Xian's expression changed slightly, and the Yen power within his body began to boil. Only Jian Wushuang remained indifferent, completely disregarding his authority and aura. "I just said that I cleared some obstructive Yen Immortals, not because they were Great Me Heaven's Yen Immortals that I acted." The prince's tightly furrowed brow eased slightly. "Even if it wasn't intentional, I will never let go of the massacre of so many subordinate Yen Immortals." Jian Wushuang's gaze sharpened, and a formidable divine pattern quietly surged around him. It was a plain but impossible to ignore pressure, rising from the bottom to counter Prince Zhou's authority and displaying resistance. Faced with this sudden and even more imposing pressure, Prince Zhou took half a step back, his expression uncertain. There was unconcealed astonishment in his eyes. It had only been a few tens of thousands of years, but Jian Wushuang's presence had surpassed what it used to be. But soon, he regained his composure and said, "Jian Wushuang, old accounts and new accounts, we'll settle them today." After his words, the prince swiftly drew the long sword hanging at his waist, and the sword's tip, emitting a green light, pointed straight ahead. In the next moment, the 20 figures in black robes behind him all moved, and the surging Yen power reached its peak. At this moment, Jian Wushuang looked at Nan Xian and said, "If you leave now, there's still time. Don't joke, young friend. I won't leave you behind in this dangerous place." Nan Xian frowned. "It's too perilous here. Let's go together." He said calmly, "I won't leave. He won't let me go." Nan Xian was puzzled. Just because of him, a young chap who isn't even a Grand Yen Immortal? Jian Wushuang wanted to tell Nan Xian that this young chap, who wasn't even a Grand Yen Immortal, was the Emperor's second son, the prince beneath the Emperor Supreme's seat, and his strength ran much deeper than what he showed. But he ultimately remained silent and instead took a step forward, placing himself in front of Nan Xian. "Jian Wushuang, do you think you can withstand the entire Great Me Heaven?" Prince Zhou's voice trembled, and the 20 figures in black robes behind him moved in unison. The extremely surging Yen power was almost tangible, and a unique aura descended. 20 black robes represented 20 Yen Immortals, but these Yen Immortals were no ordinary ones. They had mastered their own immortal styles. Once they mastered an immortal technique, it meant they had found their own path, the path to ascend. Quasi-Grand Yen Immortals. 20 Quasi-Grand Yen Immortals. I'm not trying to withstand the entire Great Me Heaven, but the entire Great Me Heaven is here to stop me. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were as sharp as a sword, full of unyielding pride. Pointing his long sword, Prince Zhou commanded, "Strike!" Boom, boom, boom. The clouds billowed, and the force erupted. Under the influence of the 20 quasi-grand Yen immortals, the void began to shatter. They had all mastered their own immortal styles, far surpassing ordinary Yen immortals, and even Jian Wushuang felt the gravity of the situation. An invisible sword wrapped in bright golden divine patterns quietly appeared. Facing the 20 quasi-grand Yen immortals, he directly released the Wushuang Sword Dao. Wushuang Sword Dao, Star River Lake Sea Sword Intent. First move. Star. With this sword move, the void directly shattered, and thousands of starlight pillars ascended, devouring everything in sight like a raging dragon. Nan Xian, who had a long sword by his waist, also drew his sword without any hesitation. A brilliant sun appeared behind him, and 9 crimson golden rays of sunshine followed the sword. At that moment, the void was covered in the aura of crimson gold. The 20 quasi-grand Yen immortals were like moths to a flame as they were engulfed. A deafening roar, capable of tearing apart the plains of entire heavenly regions, finally erupted in the southwest direction of the Great Mi Heaven. The range of this shockwave was too vast. Even Prince Zhou couldn't ignore it. He hurriedly waved his hand to bring down endless authority, using it to suppress the turmoil. As the master of the entire Great Mi Heaven, it was connected to Prince Zhou's fate energy, so he could suppress the chaos very quickly. At the same time, the shock and fear in his eyes only grew. When had Jian Wushuang grown to such a level that he could single-handedly confront 20 quasi-grand Yen immortals? One had to know that there were a total of 20 quasi-grand Yen immortals, enough to trample over any super-heavenly region. But now, they seemed to be in dire straits. The resentment towards Jian Wushuang made Prince Zhou unable to endure any longer, and he directly shattered the void, slashing towards Jian Wushuang. The void tore apart, and Lord Zhou, wearing ink-gold battle armor, broke through the brilliant golden radiance, his sword cutting through everything. However, his long sword did not land on Jian Wushuang but was blocked by a slender and deep green true sword. "Hey, I say, let us leave, or else your heavenly region will be destroyed." Nan Xian held his swords with both hands, keeping Prince Zhou at bay, and said loudly, "Get lost." Prince Zhou almost went insane, raising his sword for a furious strike. Stars burst forth, but Nan Xian blocked them all. "Ignorant!" he sneered, and with a shake of his deep green sword, he forced Prince Zhou back 100 meters. Blood surged within Prince Zhou, and he was so infuriated that he nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. He could not understand why Jian Wushuang always had Grand Yen Immortals by his side. In the entire Great Sea region, where the Grand Yen Immortals were on the brink of extinction, why did they always appear by Jian Wushuang's side? Prince Zhou, in his anger, actually calmed himself down. Facing Nan Xian, who was a Grand Yen Immortal, he no longer clashed head-on but took a step back. The magnificent meaning of crimson gold slowly dissipated, and the shattered void returned to silence. Jian Wushuang stood still with his sword in his hand. In front of him, the 20 quasi-grand Yen Immortals had disappeared without a trace, not even leaving behind a speck of dust. In just a moment, 20 quasi-grand Yen Immortals were directly erased. This situation even exceeded his expectations. But Jian Wushuang quickly realized that this was almost an inevitable outcome. With the combined attack of Nan Xian and himself, there was no possibility of survival for the 20 quasi-grand Yen Immortals. Looking at the devastated heavenly region plains and void, Jian Wushuang knew that he and Prince Zhou would fight to the death. Ignoring the prince, Nan Xian quickly arrived in front of him and said, "Hurry, let's go." But Jian Wushuang shook his head and said, "You go first. I'll handle things here." Nan Xian urged anxiously, "Why are you staying here? It's not wise at this time." However, Jian Wushuang remained resolute in signaling him to leave first. "Then don't blame me," Nan Xian said, preparing to take action. "Why bother?" Jian Wushuang sighed inwardly and stopped him. "If we don't leave now, we won't be able to escape." Nan Xian raised his voice. "Even if we can't escape, who can harm me?" The next moment, a more ancient and profound aura awakened without any warning. That aura transcended the constraints of the current heavenly laws, and the grand celestial laws of the universe began to collapse and shatter. It was an aura from the ancient era. Sensing the arrival of this aura, Nanshen swallowed the rest of his words. His eyebrows twitched, and he muttered, "Young friend, how much trouble have you truly stirred up?" Jian Wushuang remained silent, bitterness flashing in his eyes. Only those terrifying beings from the ancient era could crush the heavenly Tao solely with their aura. And from that era, the terrifying presence would certainly not be less than 9 revolutions. The 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal was an absolute pinnacle existence. Even though Jian Wushuang could slay a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal and even contend against a 6 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal, he was utterly powerless when facing a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Not to mention, those who possessed such an ancient aura were all big shots. A cruel smile appeared on Prince Zhou's face. A slender figure had appeared behind him. Seeing the appearance of that figure, Jian Wushuang's eyes momentarily widened. His gaze filled with incredulity. That figure left a deep impression on him, and even now he had not forgotten. From the great Mi heaven, the terrifying presence that destroyed one of Di Qing's true life single-handedly, Changfu, that was the presence that had ultimately perished. But now, the reappearance of Changfu made Jian Wushuang feel as though he had plunged into an icy cave. Prince Zhou slowly retreated. Long Fu, dressed in mountain and water robe, nodded slightly and then walked forward at a leisurely pace. Nanshen cleared his throat, his expression somewhat unnatural. As a Grand Yen Immortal, he naturally sensed the formidable aura emanating from Changfu. He finally understood what Jian Wushuang meant. Even if he wanted to leave now, he couldn't. They looked at each other from afar. Jian Wushuang did not take a step back when facing Changfu. "Long time no see." Changfu nodded slightly, giving a friendly gesture. Although he was a little surprised, he still returned the greeting. "Di Qing, is he well?" Changfu asked again. Jian Wushuang nodded. "Not bad. His injuries have recovered well." And so, the two of them began to discuss matters with each other. This left Nanshen somewhat dumbfounded, and even Prince Zhou found it hard to keep a straight face. He said in a deep voice, "Elder Changfu, please eliminate all enemies." As the command descended, silence returned to the void. Jian Wushuang knew that he could not avoid it forever. An invisible sword surrounded by divine glyphs appeared in his hand, the tip of the sword pointing straight at Changfu. Nanshen was shocked. He even felt that this scene was extremely unreal. A puny little Yen Immortal was actually pointing his sword at a 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal? "It's my duty. Please don't blame me," Changfu said calmly. He raised his finger and then pointed downwards. In an instant, the void shattered and the heavenly Tao collapsed. With just a finger, he broke through all the obstacles and landed on Jian Wushuang. Splat! Divine blood splattered, and his chest was completely shattered. He did not even make any effective resistance. Nanshen turned pale with fright and hurriedly tried to help Jian Wushuang up. However, Changfu's attack landed on him again. Intense pain instantly spread throughout his limbs and bones. Nanshen felt his entire back completely shatter, and his immortal source was rapidly dissipating. "Damn it!" Before he could finish his sentence, he fainted. In just a brief moment, Jian Wushuang became a bloodied figure, utterly devoid of any resistance. He clung to his unconscious, severely wounded body, struggling to breathe. Upon witnessing this scene, though Prince Zhou found it hard to believe, his ecstasy quickly dispelled his doubts. With the long sword in hand, Prince Zhou decided to kill Jian Wushuang himself. However, before he could move, Changfu opened his palm again. Ancient and deathly aura emanated from his palm, causing the vast void to crumble and shatter. Violent and surging astral winds erupted from the cracks, shredding everything in their path. Finally, Jian Wushuang's figure was engulfed and consumed by the astral winds of the void, disappearing without a trace. Prince Zhou exclaimed in shock, "Where's Jian Wushuang?" Changfu nodded and said, "He has been torn apart within the chaotic void turbulence." "No, it can't be. Is he really dead?" Prince Zhou couldn't believe it. Had this Yen Immortal, who he considered his greatest enemy, really died so abruptly? Prince Zhou sought reassurance. Elder Chongfu, is he truly dead, with no possibility of resurrection? Chongfu nodded. Your Highness, there is absolutely no possibility. No Yen Immortal can escape my grasp. Satisfied with the confirmation, Gongziju nodded and regained his composure, seemingly unaffected by feelings of joy. Very well, let's return for now and make further plans later. After a brief pause at the scene, the forms of Prince Zhou and Chongfu eventually vanished into the void. Once again, all was silent. In this battle, more than 10 of the heavenly region planes were shattered, and the void was riddled with holes. As far as the eye could see, it was all filled with raging astral winds of chaos. Yet within this tumultuous and chaotic astral wind, a pair of eyes with a faint golden glint quietly opened. Back then, Di Qing spared my life, and that's why I survived. Now it's time to repay that favor. The sound of Chong Fu's voice echoed in his mind, repeating incessantly for a long time. In the midst of the empty void and the gale of the void, the once shattered immortal body of Jian Wushuang was visibly restoring itself at a remarkable speed. In just a few dozen breaths it had fully recovered. And in his arms, Nan Xian, who had been lying motionless, opened his eyes at this moment and exclaimed, "Could it be? You're really not dead." Jian Wushuang nodded calmly. Long before he made his move, Chongfu had secretly informed him during their conversation that he should feign death to avoid the entanglement of Prince Zhou. This was also the reason why Jian Wushuang died so easily. It's terrifying. How can there be such beings in the great domain? Nan Xian, who had come back to life, said with lingering fear. This was his first time being in such close contact with a 9 Revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. After ascending to the Grand Yen Immortal realm, each transformation was like a deep abyss, and the pressure brought upon Nan Xian by the 9 revolutions was something he fundamentally could not resist. That was also the reason why Nan Xian was so astonished. Because 9 revolutions Grand Yen Immortals could only exist in that ancient era. In the end, the War of Emperors came to an end, and the Immortals were annihilated. There are some things that cannot be explained in a few words. What we can do now is to leave. Jian Wushuang said calmly. He stood up slowly in the chaotic and violent void gales. Nan Xian also got up and looked at his retreating figure with a pensive expression. The void gales could cause some harm to Yen Immortals, but for a Grand Yen Immortal it was like a mere itch. In order to avoid the detection of his own Yen power, Jian Wushuang signaled Nan Xian to suppress his Yen power. They then disappeared into the turbulent flow along with the raging void gales. Young friend, do you think we'll be swept to some unknown place by this gale? I'm not too sure. Since the astral winds are in Great Me Heaven, it should stay within this range. Then wouldn't we be dragged into this for quite a long time? Perhaps. Due to the severe fragmentation of the void, the gust of wind became even more violent, showing no signs of following any rules. Huge vortexes rotated in the shattered void, and stars faded away. These void gusts could cause considerable damage to lower-level Yen Immortals, but their harm to the Grand Yen Immortals was almost negligible. However, due to the previous battle, Nan Xian suffered some injuries from Chongfu's finger attack. Although he did not fall, he could not release his Yen power to protect himself, so he quickly fainted again. As for Jian Wushuang, the void winds could not break his defense at all. Despite his immortal body not having Yen power, the gales did not affect him at all. Thus, he held Nan Xian with one arm and shuttled through the violent void winds like a fish swimming in water. Since Sword Wushuang didn't have much knowledge about the Great Me Heaven, he had no choice but to move blindly, allowing the gusts of the void to carry them anywhere. Under such a battle, the peripheral heavenly regions of the Great Me Heaven fell into chaos, with the void shattered, and all the heavenly regions were in turmoil. Floating within the gusty vortexes, it was unknown how much time had passed before Jian Wushuang felt the gusts of the void tearing at his immortal body gradually dissipate, and the force supporting his flotation disappeared. It was like falling into boundless darkness, everything turning dim. But this unknown dimness lasted for less than 10 breaths of time before suddenly clearing up. Sword Wushuang quietly opened his eyes. Faint flowing clouds reflected in his eyes, along with a unique crimson color that was characteristic of the morning glow. This was a peculiar heavenly region plane. Senior brother. Look up there. Something's in the sky. No. Something's wrong with the sky. It's changing. Run. I think the sky is collapsing. Amidst the clamor, the chaotic sounds of people splashing in the water echoed continuously. About 40 to 50 bare-chested men carrying baskets on their backs were running along the shore. Clearly, they had all noticed the strange changes in the sky and were hurrying to escape. At this moment, the youngest and most inexperienced disciple cried out in panic, "Senior brother, what about our sword blanks?" The burly man leading the group turned back and urgently replied, "Run. It's too late for that now. We can't worry about it at a time like this. Let's go back and see our master." Hearing this, the young disciple gritted his teeth and bent down to pick up 4 or 5 sword blanks before quickly catching up with the group. They ran frantically along the riverbank, all the men watching the sky with deep concern. At this moment, the sky above them had already developed numerous fine cracks, and crimson fiery clouds covered the entire sky. Moreover, in the center, a violent whirlpool began to surge as if it could shatter at any moment. In the next moment, the raging whirlpool seemed to have reached its breaking point and began to collapse. A crimson pillar of light, 10,000 feet in size, suddenly pierced through the sky, illuminating the entire earth. As far as the eye could see, everything was filled with a hazy golden light. All the men running halted in their tracks, unable to believe what they were witnessing. They realized that although the sky had broken, the destructive force that seemed unstoppable had not harmed anything. Furthermore, these rays of light existed for only an instant, then retreated like tides, disappearing without a trace. Is this a dream?" The muscular man at the front exclaimed in disbelief. But soon he realized that it was not a dream but a reality. Because although the sky had been repaired, the cracks that had not yet disappeared were still visible. At this moment, the young disciple holding the sword blanks whispered in astonishment, "Master, look at the water." Following his outstretched finger, everyone turned their gaze towards the surface of the water. There, hovering above the vast expanse of water, was a figure dressed in simple attire, with a faint golden radiance flowing around him, exuding an indescribable aura of power. And in his arms, he cradled a figure in black, silently suspended above the water. The leader of the muscular men's pupils contracted as he saw the powerful figure approaching them. In the face of such a formidable presence, not to mention confrontation, they could barely stand steady. All the muscular men's faces turned pale, and they kept retreating. Splash! Due to nervousness, the young disciple carrying the sword blanks slipped and fell into the water along with his cargo. In the next moment, thousands of threads of faint golden radiance quietly emerged from the water, lifting the young disciple out of the water along with the sword blanks. "Junior brother!" the muscular man exclaimed in shock, attempting to reach out and rescue him, but they found an invisible barrier separating them. And so, thousands of radiance threads carried the young disciple towards the center of the river. "Young friend, pardon the intrusion. What place is this?" "This is where my master resides," called the Sansuan Mountain. Sansuan Mountain? Jian Wushuang felt his heart surging with emotions he hadn't experienced in a long time, an indescribable excitement resurfacing once more. Even though that glimmer of hope had seemed elusive and intangible, it had materialized in a way that felt predestined by the heavens. The Sansuan Mountain, a place so elusive and difficult to find, had been stumbled upon almost by accident. For a moment, Jian Wushuang was unsure of how to react. As for the young disciple lying in the lush grass, though he appeared somewhat nervous, curiosity and admiration overwhelmed him. The appearance of Jian Wushuang breaking through the sky left a profound impression on him, an overwhelming power etched into his memory, never to be forgotten. Collecting his thoughts, Jian Wushuang spoke, Is this the secluded place of the divine craftsman, Su Tuo? Ah, Su Tuo? The young disciple paused. Who is he? Before he could respond, a burly man who had been standing by the shore stepped forward and asked, Visitor, what business do you have with my master? Jian Wushuang secretly breathed a sigh of relief and replied, I came here to seek guidance from the divine craftsman on some questions that have troubled me for days. The burly man furrowed his brow. My master doesn't meet visitors easily. Even if you come, there's no guarantee you'll get to see him. I still wish to see him. Otherwise, I won't have peace of mind, Jian Wushuang said, bowing respectfully and placing Nanshan aside. At this moment, a slender man discreetly tugged on the burly man's sleeve and whispered, Senior brother, we shouldn't bring him there. It's been so long since Master last had a visitor. If we take him now, Master might become angry with us. Didn't you see that junior brother is in his hands? If we don't let him go now, disaster will befall us, the muscular man said. The slender man sighed and said no more. Afterward, he bowed and said, If the visitor insists, we will guide him. However, can we release my junior brother first? Jian Wushuang was taken aback, realizing his earlier mistake. He quickly sent the young disciple back to the shore. Unexpectedly, as soon as he landed, a burly man raised his hand and delivered 2 blows to his head. The young disciple felt wronged and said, Senior brother, why are you hitting me? If I don't teach you a lesson, how will you remember anything? The burly man said angrily. Then he turned around and bowed. In that case, please follow us, guest. Jian Wushuang nodded and picked up the still unconscious Nanshan, following closely behind. With that, nearly 50 burly men with bare chests and carrying backpacks walked along the water's edge, heading towards the mountains. The youngest and most inexperienced disciple walked at the rear of the group, clutching a sword blank in one hand and touching his head with the other, muttering softly, So my master's name is Su Tuo? Like an ink painting, the ink-covered mountains stretched into the distance, with green being the dominant color. Jian Wushuang carried the still unconscious Nanshan and walked at the forefront of the group, alongside the burly man. They walked in silence, but during this time, Jian Wushuang observed all the details. These accompanying men had extremely strong arms, and most of them had burn marks on their forearms, as well as shiny iron shavings on their pant legs, indicating years of ironworking. At the same time, these men addressed the master craftsman Su Tuo as their master, which was enough evidence that they were at the 3-inch mountain. Guest, may I know your name? The burly man finally spoke. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. My surname is Jian, and Wushuang is my name. Lord Jian. He suddenly hesitated. My master has a peculiar temper and has never appeared publicly. It's likely not an easy task to seek an audience with him. Are there any obstacles? Jian Wushuang asked. The burly man nodded. Master has a peculiar temper and has never appeared publicly, so in order to maintain his peace and quiet, he has set up 3 trials. Only by passing all 3 trials can one have a chance to see him. Very well, I'll proceed, he said, his gaze calm, showing no sign of hesitation. Jian Wushuang's decisiveness and composure surprised the burly man. By the time he realized it, Jian Wushuang was already on his way alone. The group of men remained in place, staring intently at his departing figure. The lean man crossed his arms, a playful expression on his face. Do you think he can truly pass all 3 trials? One of the men spoke up. If he can pierce a hole in the sky, what can possibly stop him? At this point, a solemn-looking man interjected. Even if one could pierce the sky, it doesn't necessarily mean they can overcome our master's 3 trials. Don't forget, no cultivator has ever seen our master's true face. But he doesn't look like an ordinary cultivator. Even if he's formidable, can he be a Yen Immortal? Remember, even Yen Immortals can be restrained when they arrive at Sansuan Mountain. The burly man waved his hand. Enough, stop arguing. Our immediate concern is to meet our master and let him decide. Then let's hurry. I have a bad feeling about this. As their footsteps grew fainter, The group of men disappeared from the scene, not entering the mountain. This was a mountain. To be precise, it was a sword mountain. Every 100 steps, there stood a sword, or what could only be described as sword-like shapes, slanting into the ground, enduring countless millennia. An indescribable sense of solemnity and desolation pervaded the area. Stepping into this vast and heavy sword mountain, Jian Wushuang became cautious. If there were indeed mountain trials, this sword mountain was undoubtedly the first one. To have a chance to meet the divine craftsman Su Tuo, he had to be extremely careful. Looking out, just the foot of the mountain alone had no less than 100,000 sword blanks. However, all these sword blanks were made of ordinary iron and had no resonance with the one who wielded them, not even a hint of sentience. Walking through this place, amidst the grand sword formations, made Jian Wushuang contemplative. He speculated on who might have crafted these mindless sword blanks and why they had been abandoned halfway. Just then, Nan Xian woke up from his slumber, stretched lazily, and looked weary. "Young friend, where exactly are we?" Jian Wushuang sighed and proceeded to explain the unexpected turn of events to him. Listening intently, Nan Xian exclaimed, "Could it be? Such a stroke of luck? Regardless of whether it is correct or not, we have to try." After uttering these final words, Jian Wushuang continued to advance. "Young friend, wait for me." Two figures moved forward with unwavering steps, paying no heed to the gusts of sword wind sweeping toward them. Soon, Jian Wushuang discovered the clues within this sword mountain. The sword blanks that covered the entire mountain foot gradually became sparse as they ascended. The mindless sword blanks gradually disappeared, vanishing completely when they reached the halfway point. In their place, pristine true swords emerged. Time seemed to have left no mark on these sword blades. They gleamed as if freshly forged, exuding a rich aura that coalesced into a thin mist. These true swords were now more than adequate for ordinary cultivators. However, in the eyes of Jian Wushuang, they lacked something crucial: resonant sentience. Only when true swords possessed sentience could they resonate with their wielders. Unfortunately, he felt no sentience emanating from any of these true swords. At that moment, Nan Xian suddenly spoke up, "Young friend, be alert. I sense a significant energy fluctuation at the mountaintop." Jian Wushuang nodded, feeling the same disturbance from the mountaintop. There were even more true swords on the mountainside than at its base, numbering no less than 200,000 by a rough estimate. Yet, out of these 200,000 true swords, not one had gained sentience. Though he was quite puzzled by this, Jian Wushuang still strolled towards the mountaintop. As the first trial of the three, he did not believe it would be this easy. As expected, at the next moment the mountaintop trembled violently. Then, a curtain of countless true swords descended from the heavens. Boom! The mountain was shaking. Nan Xian raised his eyebrows and prepared to attack. However, Jian Wushuang acted first. He took a step forward, swung his right arm, and thousands of sword-light beams burst forth instantly. The collision between the two forces sent shockwaves throughout the sword mountain, reducing all the true swords within 1,000 miles to dust. The sword curtain also shattered, dispersing in all directions. A huge crisis was resolved just like that. But Jian Wushuang did not pause for even a moment. He leaped straight to the mountaintop. Nan Xian followed closely, quickly catching up. Upon reaching the mountaintop, a unique atmosphere, distinct from that of the mountain's base and slopes, spread out, causing even the clouds to turn a dark red hue. It was an ancient, desolate aura, vast and breathless, a solitude that seemed to transcend the concept of time itself, affecting even Yen immortals. As they gazed into the distance, upon the dark brown, ravaged mountaintops, they saw fragmented long swords, some embedded at odd angles, some buried beneath the earth, all carrying an unspeakable sense of desolation. Each sword, though broken, retained its sharpness, untouched by the ravages of time. It appeared as if this place had borne witness to a ferocious battle, the swordsman long gone, leaving behind a land soaked in divine blood. "There is only sadness left here," Nan Xian muttered, Then, he scooped up a handful of soil from the ground under his feet. The soil was blood-red, as if repeatedly soaked. "This is not Sword Mountain. It is a sword tomb," said Jian Wushuang, eyeing all the shattered long swords. Despite enduring countless ages and suffering fractures, these long swords retained their sentience. Jian Wushuang could even sense a faint resonance among them. At that moment, an ancient voice, seemingly from nowhere, resounded. "Well said. This is indeed a sword tomb, my final resting place." Jian Wushuang and Nanshen became alert at the same time. They even released their yen power simultaneously. "Do not worry. I mean you no harm. I simply wish to talk," the voice continued. With the voice's descent, all the broken long swords emitted a soft hum. Then, a figure in a black robe appeared atop the mountain peak, descending slowly. With each step he took, the shattered long swords moved in rhythm, as if welcoming an old friend they hadn't seen in ages. Jian Wushuang's heart was on edge. He could distinctly feel the dreadfulness emanating from the figure in the black robe, an ancient aura. "I have been asleep for a very long time, and I haven't spoken in ages," he said. In a matter of moments, the figure in the black robe stood before Jian Wushuang and lowered the hood that covered his face. The hood revealed a face that, though aged, bore a resolute countenance, much like a sword, captivating and piercing. Jian Wushuang remained silent, looking at the elderly figure before him. He strangely felt a sense of familiarity. As for Nanshen, he was rendered speechless. Despite being a grand yen immortal, the aura emanating from the elderly figure easily overwhelmed him. Hence, neither of them dared to make any rash moves. Observing their cautious expressions, the elderly figure in the black robe smiled warmly. "Do not be afraid. I am just a broken sword spirit, and I harbor no ill intentions towards you." "A sword spirit?" Jian Wushuang's heart trembled, looking at the elderly figure in disbelief. A true sword with a spirit could only lead to a deeper level of mastery. Long before encountering this black-robed elder, Jian Wushuang had speculated about his identity, but the one thing he hadn't anticipated was the sword spirit. To grow to such an extent, what a terrifying existence the sword spirit must be. It was an unimaginable existence, even more bewildering than a sword immortal. To be born as a tool to transform into a soul, and ultimately become a sword spirit, continuously ascending to the pinnacle. And now, this elder was the pinnacle of the sword spirit. At this moment, the black-robed elder chuckled again. "I almost forgot to mention, even before I went into slumber, I was already a peak grand yen immortal. Peak grand yen immortals, surpassing 9 revolutions, the closest one could get to emperor-level cultivation. Even in that ancient era, peak grand yen immortals were exceedingly rare. And this black-robed elder was not just a sword spirit, but also a peak grand yen immortal. This completely exceeded Jian Wushuang's imagination. If a sword spirit could reach the pinnacle of the grand yen immortal, what level of existence would its master be? Nanshen was completely speechless. Everything that had happened during his time by Jian Wushuang's side, the encounters with yen immortals, and even the legendary grand yen immortals, had all far surpassed his imagination. What he had once been proud of seemed almost insignificant now. Jian Wushuang gulped. He had never thought that there would be such a terrifying existence in Sansuan Mountain. The black-robed elder paid no heed to the astonishment in his eyes and continued. "Young one, as the stars revolve and the years pass, I must ask, where is this place where I slumber located?" Despite the shock he felt, Jian Wushuang, an individual who had experienced countless battles, quickly composed himself and replied, "This place belongs to the Great Sea region." "The Great Sea? Excellent, excellent." The black-robed elder revealed a highly satisfied expression. "Then, let me ask one more question. Who is the emperor of this Great Sea region?" "The emperor of the Great Sea region is Zhen Wuyang." As Jian Wushuang spoke, a realization dawned in his eyes. A peak grand yen immortal asking such a grand question in itself was significant. Jian Wushuang had already guessed the identity of the owner of this sword spirit. Upon learning this news, The old man in the black robe's complexion returned to warmth, and he nodded, saying, "It's in accordance with the emperor's will." Following that, his gaze shifted between Jian Wushuang and Nan Xian, ultimately settling on Jian Wushuang. "Young friend, have you ever met Emperor Jian Wuyang?" With these words, the old man in the black robe initially shook his head, self-deprecatingly chuckling. "I must be getting senile to ask such a question." "I have," Jian Wushuang replied calmly, his expression unchanged. The old man in the black robe's eyes immediately widened in disbelief. "You really met him? How is that even possible?" It was no wonder the old man in the black robe reacted this way. As the emperor of the entire vast and boundless Great Sea region, Emperor Jian Wuyang was already an unparalleled existence. The very foundation of the heavenly court was situated in the heavenly realm, and even the heavenly realm alone was beyond the reach and gaze of ordinary Yen immortals, let alone seeing the true face of Emperor Jian Wuyang. So, the old man in the black robe was naturally astonished at Jian Wushuang's words. To avoid any complications arising from their conversation, Jian Wushuang added, "During a grand heavenly court banquet, I once observed from a distance." The old man in the black robe suddenly realized, "Ah, I see now, I see." Although there were loopholes in Jian Wushuang's explanation, it sufficed to deflect further questions. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He could sense that the old man meant no harm and was merely reminiscing about the past. At this point, the old man in the black robe spoke again. "Since the young one has seen Emperor Jian Wuyang, have you also encountered another figure by his side?" "Who?" "A Yi immortal who followed Emperor Jian Wuyang, named Yu Chong." Upon hearing this name, Jian Wushuang's spiritual consciousness quivered. He was far more familiar with this name than with Emperor Jian Wuyang. His first narrow escape, his second narrow escape, and their brief encounter in the heavenly court had left a deep impression on him. Jian Wushuang nodded. "I have seen him too." The black-robed elder rarely revealed a hint of joy. "How is he doing? Has he made any progress?" "Everything is fine. There are no major issues." "Very well, then I can rest easy." He nodded, a satisfied smile in his eyes. "Since all the news has been obtained, I have no reason to keep you here any longer." Jian Wushuang felt a sense of relief. If the black-robed elder did not object, it meant that he had passed the first test. With a wave of his hand as he spoke, in an instant, all scenes retreated like a tide. "My obsession is over, and now I will truly go to sleep." "Thank you, young friend," the black-robed elder said with a smile as he bowed. Jian Wushuang was taken aback, suddenly realizing where that heavy sense of twilight had come from. This black-robed elder was inevitably heading towards his demise. As if confirming his suspicions, the black-robed elder said at last, "I am about to wither away, and I have nothing of value left. If you don't mind, you can take this as a memento." With those words, a thumb-sized object was thrown towards Jian Wushuang. He reached out and caught it, and saw a dark blue diamond-shaped crystal in his hand, radiating unparalleled power. In the center of this small crystal there was a character. "You, young friend, take care." After saying these last words, the black-robed elder's figure turned into a long wind and dissipated into nothingness. A dark blue brilliance, like a swimming fish or a graceful swallow, moved gracefully in the air and finally returned to the crystal in Jian Wushuang's hand. Jian Wushuang looked at the crystal in his hand, lost in thought. A peak grand Yen immortal from the distant ancient era. The sword spirit had just disappeared like this. He left almost no trace, and there was no earth-shattering scene. It was a sigh-inducing departure. Adjusting his thoughts, Jian Wushuang then looked at Nan Xian. "Let's go. Why are you still standing here?" Coming back to his senses, Nan Xian looked at him and smiled bitterly. "The more I get to know you, the less I understand you, young friend. If you can't understand, save it for later. The most important thing now is to leave this place," Jian Wushuang said as he casually tucked the crystal into his bosom. Nan Xian nodded and followed him down the mountain. Standing at the top of the mountain, Jian Wushuang looked back one last time at the spot where the black-robed elder had stood before finally leaving. The entire sword mountain or sword tomb seemed to have lost its vitality, with all the true swords and sword blanks vanishing, turning into a green mountain. After leaving Sword Mountain, the path ahead was no longer a rugged mountain trail, but had transformed into a wide road paved with blue stones. The road was so wide that it extended into the depths of the distant clouds. The second trial? Jian Wushuang was puzzled, but he still stepped forward. As he stepped onto the blue stone road, a strange sensation suddenly arose. An intensely scorching aura erupted from the surrounding wilderness, burning everything. Even Jian Wushuang's immortal body felt the peculiar heat. But this extreme heat quickly faded, replaced by an intense cold. The rapid shift between hot and cold made it extremely uncomfortable. What's going on? Why is it so peculiar? Nanshen frowned and then reached out to manipulate the air. He was actually altering the rules of this world with just a casual gesture. If it were said that Yen Immortals stood above the heavenly Tao, then Grand Yen Immortals not only stood above the heavenly Tao but could also casually modify the rules of the heavenly Tao. And for Nanshen, as a Grand Yen Immortal, modifying the heavenly Tao of this world was as simple as can be. Soon, he completed the modification, turning the bizarre weather into a cloudless sky spanning thousands of miles. Jian Wushuang could only shake his head in amusement. Modifying the heavenly Tao on such a scale just for clear weather was probably something only Nanshen could do. All right, the damn weather's back to normal. Let's hurry on our way, he said, raising an eyebrow, looking quite pleased with himself. Jian Wushuang nodded and took the lead. They had passed the first trial of Sword Mountain without any disturbances, but the second trial would likely be much more challenging. He couldn't be sure if the divine craftsman Su Tuo would increase the difficulty, so he decided to give it his all. Inside Sword Mountain lay a terrifying ancient power. Sword Wushuang didn't believe that the upcoming challenges would be easy. This broad road paved with blue stones was very likely the second trial. Only by traversing this wide road would they have a chance to meet the divine craftsman Su Tuo. Although Sword Wushuang wasn't certain whether they could uncover the secrets of the heaven script bone armor once they met Su Tuo, he pressed on without hesitation. Even though the information was vague and elusive, he continued to seek answers. At this moment, Nanshen suddenly spoke. "Young friend, do you think there might be a Yen Immortal guarding this road?" Jian Wushuang's mouth twitched slightly, just as he was about to speak when he was interrupted by a gusty wind. Force! Both of them became alert simultaneously, their sharp gazes fixed on the swirling clouds on both sides of the road. "Who dares to cause disturbance here?" A voice, ethereal yet steady, echoed, followed by the clear cry of a crane from within the clouds. An ethereal but extremely calm voice resounded, followed by a clear crane cry from the clouds. Then the clouds parted, and a 10 li wide scarlet-crowned white crane soared out, with a white-robed old man sitting cross-legged on its back. "Quite the entrance," muttered Nanshen under his breath, preparing for a fight. The white-robed old man gracefully descended and landed on the green stone road, while the 10 li wide crane transformed into a young boy upon touching the ground. One old, one young, one tall, one short, 2 Yen Immortals now stood in their way, blocking their path. However, this was just the beginning. Several figures broke through the clouds and descended onto the road, blocking the way. There were 5 figures in total, 5 Yen Immortals, and with the white-robed elder as the center, they walked towards Jian Wushuang. "Who dares to cause disturbance here?" Nanshen was about to take action but was stopped by Jian Wushuang. He then said, "We have no intention of disturbing you. We've come here only to see the divine craftsman Su Tuo and seek comprehension." "Comprehension? I suggest you leave. The divine craftsman Su Tuo does not entertain visitors," the white-robed old man said forcefully, his voice carrying a tone of suppression. Jian Wushuang remained unfazed and continued, "Please inform him that we only seek comprehension, and once that is achieved, we will leave immediately. Can't you understand words, or do you want me to expel you myself?" A burly man with round ears and a round face angrily said. "You're asking for it," Nanshen shouted coldly, unleashing a palm strike through the air. In the next moment, The burly man with round ears and a round face let out a sudden, unconscious groan as his massive figure was sent flying without warning. Two streams of blood traced an arc in the air before landing on the white robe of the white-robed old man. Because everything happened too quickly, the remaining Yen immortals did not react in time, and the burly man with round ears and a round face lay unconscious on the ground. Without bothering to wipe off the blood on his white robe, the old man with long beard and eyebrows shouted at the top of his lungs, "Attack! Be cautious and make sure to knock them out. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome later," Jian Wushuang quickly advised, fearing that Nanshan might go too far and kill someone. "Don't worry, I'll treat them well," Nanshan replied with a faint smile. His figure instantly disappeared from his spot. Subsequently, the battle only lasted for 10 breaths, and after those 10 breaths, the storm settled. Nanshan returned to Jian Wushuang's side and let out a sigh. "That was annoying." Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly. Before him, the Yen immortals who had appeared so dignified and ethereal moments ago were now all tied up together and unconscious. The unconscious Yen immortals had never expected that their opponent would be a grand Yen immortal. It was a near absolute domination. As long as Nanyuan willed it, a mere flick of his finger could easily crush them. As the group of gate-guarding cultivators, known as Guardian Immortals, fell unconscious, the vast road leading to the clouds finally opened completely. Jian Wushuang sighed in silence, then continued to move forward. Even though there were hundreds, if not thousands, of Yen immortals ahead, dealing with them was only a matter of time for him now. Having once reached higher realms, how could he possibly return to square one? Moreover, this time he had a true grand Yen immortal accompanying him. Failure was not an option. 2 of the 3 trials had been completed, and only the final one remained. At the end of the expansive road lay undulating mountain peaks, with endless clouds rolling and billowing. At the summit of these rolling mountains, a suspension bridge spanned millions of miles, suspended precariously in the midst of the clouds. A breathtaking sight. "This is truly a grand spectacle just to meet someone." Nanshan stood before the suspension bridge, feeling sentimental. In this setting, it almost seems like a man pursuing a woman in the mortal world. Jian Wushuang gave a faint smile. "There's much to reflect upon." Nanshan smiled too. "Indeed, there is. After all, I've spent countless lifetimes in the mortal world, watching them build towering structures only to see them crumble. It naturally evokes many emotions. Their lives are short, and they can't even compare to the time it takes for us to take a single breath. However, they still live diligently. It's truly worth admiring." Jian Wushuang listened quietly to his reflections, his eyes showing a hint of tenderness. From the smallest beginnings, one can still glimpse the grand Tao. Just like that, a Tao discussion began on the peak of the clouds. The clouds and mist are ethereal, gathering and dispersing. After an unknown amount of time, when the suspension bridge beneath their feet disappeared and was replaced by solid ground, Jian Wushuang finally realized that they had completed the last part of the journey without any disturbances. The 3rd trial, could it be that we've passed it as well? He still found it somewhat unbelievable. At this moment, a clear voice rang out, "No, of course not. With me here, passing it won't be so easy." With the utterance of this voice, the mist quickly dissipated, revealing towering pavilions and terraces that surpassed one another, stretching gloriously into the sky. In contrast to Jian Wushuang, there stood a young man with a bare chest, his muscular arms holding a long sword with an expressionless demeanor. He was an immortal of the Yen clan, cold and aloof. He looked at Jian Wushuang and said directly, "I want to fight you." Nanshan smiled. This kid really underestimates himself. Jian Wushuang paid little attention to this, nodding and saying, "All right, but before we start, let me ask you first. Does the divine craftsman Su Tuo reside here? Let's fight first." The young man shouted and slashed down with his sword. Nanshan retreated, leaving a space for this battle. Faced with the descending sword, Jian Wushuang did not release his invisible sword but instead raised both hands and met it head-on. As the sword came down, shattering the clouds for hundreds of feet. He simply sidestepped it. The young man was a Yen Immortal, and his control over the long sword was precise, advancing step by step, relentlessly pressing Jian Wushuang. Countless sword radiance burst forth from the sword, like a sky-covering brilliance descending. However, Jian Wushuang only waved his arm and shattered the sword light. Following that, he leaped forward, appearing directly in front of the young man and quietly gripping the sword with his index and middle fingers. Ding! With a crisp sound, the snow-white long sword broke into several pieces, leaving only the hilt. Finger-snapping the sword in two, Jian Wushuang's face turned serious. He bent his finger and released a surge of yen power, sending the young man flying. The clouds shattered, and he tumbled through the air, finally crashing in front of a building. Huff, huff, huff! He rolled over and panted heavily. I don't believe it, let's go again.